Good evening, everyone. I would like to call tonight's meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Here.
Councilmember Fulcher,
Present.
Councilmember DeBala, Councilmember Gibson,
Here.
Councilmember Siemens, Councilmember Hanzak,
Present.
Councilmember Small.
Rock on. And all.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us this evening. Tonight, we have just a little bit of a shift in the schedule, in the agenda. We will start with our proclamation honoring the 40-year anniversary of Tacoma Park's nuclear-free zone. And then tonight, we have a series of voting sessions. We are doing a little bit of a switch. The first item will be the resolution authorizing the use of the FY 22 State Revitalization Program National Capital Strategic Economic Development Fund, or NED grant awards to ensure affordability at 7402 and 7406 Garland Avenue. The second item will be the council resolution on the minor master plan amendment. The third item will be the resolution adopting the FY 2025 budget priorities. And the fourth item will be the resolution setting forth the dates for the city council's holiday recess. In terms of upcoming agendas, on Wednesday, December the 20th, the council will not meet. Friday, December the 22nd, city offices and facilities are closed through Monday, December the 25th for the Christmas holiday. On Monday, December the 25th is Christmas Day. City offices and facilities are closed for the Christmas holiday. On Wednesday, December the 27th, the city council will not meet. And on Monday, January the 1st is New Year's Day. City offices and facilities are closed Sunday through Monday for the New Year's holiday. On Wednesday, January the 3rd, the city council will not meet. On Wednesday, January 10th, the city council will resume its regular meetings. And on Monday, January the 15th, is Martin Luther King Day. City offices are closed Sunday and Monday for the Martin Luther King Day holiday. All right, and so with that, we're going to move into the agenda. And the first item is a proclamation honoring the 40-year anniversary of the Tacoma Park nuclear-free zone. Whereas on December the 12th, 1983, the City of Tacoma Park City Council voted unanimously to adopt an ordinance recognizing our city as a nuclear-free zone. And whereas this ordinance bans producing, transporting, storage, disposal, and activation of nuclear weapons in Tacoma Park, and whereas the city's nuclear-free zone ordinance was unprecedented as the first in the country to prohibit municipal investments in industries and institutions which are knowingly and intentionally engaged in the production of nuclear weapons, and whereas the establishment of a nuclear-free zone helped Tacoma Park to put itself on the international stage as a city that is willing to take bold steps to ensure the health and safety of not only its residents but the world at large, and whereas this ordinance brought together hundreds of residents to support its passage, including testimony from elementary school children and U.S. Peace Corps veterans, and whereas the City Council appointed volunteer nuclear-free committee was formed to educate the public on those issues and oversee compliance with the ordinance. And whereas through the last 40 years, a number of residents have steadfastly served our committee as stewards of this cause. And whereas city staff is ready to take the responsibilities of overseeing compliance with the nuclear-free zone ordinance from the City Council appointed committee. And whereas the city continues to be fully committed to maintaining our city as a nuclear-free zone. And whereas the city encourages community organizations to continue the efforts to educate others about the importance of denuclearization. Now, therefore, I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, Maryland, hereby acknowledge the City of Tacoma Park's 40-year anniversary as a nuclear-free committee and recognize the community members who have served on the nuclear-free committee by expressing my deep appreciation for their dedication and their contribution to this historic city policy. And I do just want to ask that if there's any members of the Nuclear Free Committee that are here today. Awesome. Please stand. We do want to recognize your activism in the city, and this proclamation recognizing our 40-year anniversary is a true testament to all of the work that you all have done. And so with that, Councilmember Small.
I just wanted to say to the members of the committee, it's the eloquence by which you guys have addressed these issues and even the issues of transition has been really moving to me personally. I sincerely wish that we lived in a more peaceful world. I hope that you can now turn your attention to white phosphorus or something, since now that we have this internally, we can address other elements of war. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And if you're open to it, we would love to have you come on stage. We have copies of the proclamation, and we're happy to take pictures with you all in celebration of the 40-year anniversary.
I think we could just proceed to the podium.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Okay, so we have it on documentation. Okay, perfect. All right, so now we're going to move on to public comments on voting items. Do we have any? Oh, all right. So hold on. I just want to make sure there's a quick procedure note. So
Mayor, point of order. I was going to say I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules to allow the members of the committee to take their 5 minutes now.
Yeah, I would second that too.
okay. All those in favor of a modification to the agenda?
Aye.
Do you have any opposed? Okay, so the motion on the floor is to allow for a comment period on the proclamation. Okay. So if there are any public comments on the proclamation?
Okay. Linda Pence Gunter, Ward 1. I have with me a peace sign that belonged to the late Pat Lovelace, appointed our official Tacoma Park Peace Delegate by a May 17, 2010 resolution introduced by Council Member Terry Siemens. Pat was a fixture at almost every council meeting. He was a champion of the anti-nuclear cause, and especially for democratic local citizen engagement. In light of the abolition of the Nuclear Free Tacoma Park Committee, it seemed time to bring Pat's sign back into this chamber. I also bring it here tonight to mark the 40th anniversary on December 12th of Tacoma Park becoming a nuclear-free zone. As you note in the proclamation just read, our nuclear-free zone status is very much part of this city's identity. When the Council abolished the Nuclear Free Committee on August 2nd, doubt was cast on what in the Nuclear Free Code might be still relevant. I would like to note that in 1984, the year after Tacoma Park became a nuclear-free zone, the doomsday clock, set by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, was at 3 minutes to midnight. Today, it is at 90 seconds to midnight, the closest in our history. Not only having been upholding the Tacoma Park Nuclear Free Code, but being proactively engaged in what it stands for, is actually more relevant today than ever. It was therefore disappointing to learn from tonight's proclamation that while you say the city is ready to take on the responsibilities of compliance with a nuclear-free zone ordinance, it will not assume any of the other responsibilities that are so integral to keeping Takoma Park on that international stage. Instead, you encourage the rest of us to do that work for you without official city endorsement. The motion that abolished the Nuclear Free Committee was not on the published August 2nd council meeting agenda, nor was it in the consent agenda. We had no notice that it was coming, so none of us was present to make public comments. Instead, it was introduced during the session as a standing motion. We have some questions regarding that motion, so I'm first going to read it back into the record verbatim as passed. Quote, "To seek the city attorney's guidance on code language for assigning the still relevant tasks, committee tasks for the Nuclear Free Committee to other municipal functions, to other groups and or individuals, reassign, that's a little better," unquote. Your records show the city has designated the firm of Karpinski, Cornbrooks and Karp as city attorney and is paying them $400,000 annually. Who from this firm actually is the city attorney? The only written requirements for membership of the Nuclear Free Committee still on your website are listed as collective experience in the areas of science, research, finance, law, peace, and ethics. Having abolished the Citizen Committee of Advisors with those skills, who among you will decide what in the Nuclear Free Code is still relevant? The city attorney? If so, what is his or her expertise and experience as per those written requirements? If members of the council or city staff will decide what is still relevant, what is your expertise? You said the council would come back and vote in the fall on the city attorney's amendments to still relevant language in the Nuclear Free Code. Has the city attorney made those changes? If not, when will they? If so, what are they and why haven't we seen them? And when will you vote on them? Can you assure us that when a vote does occur on amendments to the Nuclear Free Code, it will this time be published on the City Council meeting agenda? Finally, several meetings ago, we submitted to you a petition signed by 640 plus people, including luminaries from the global nuclear free movement, recommending that you restore the Nuclear Free Committee. Did you read the petition? And is it safe to assume, based on today's proclamation, that you have decided to ignore that recommendation? Under the City Council's rules, meeting rules and procedures, it says, quote, "When a speaker asks questions or raises a topic during public comments, to the extent possible, acknowledgement or responses will be provided later in the meeting, after the meeting in writing, or at a future meeting in city manager comments." With all due respect, Madam Mayor and members of this council, good governing is not just listening, it is also responding. And I have the questions here in summary, in case that's helpful. Thank you.
It is, thank you. Do we have any additional comments on the nuclear-free proclamation?
Yes. And I think we're going to hold up the Nuclear Free Committee banner for you. Thank you. Okay. Good evening. Paul Gunter, Ward 1. As a former member of the Nuclear Free Committee, it's difficult to believe in the sincerity of the city's deep appreciation of the committee's work on this 40th anniversary, given that, as noted in the proclamation, you've disbanded us. Missing from this proclamation is any reference to the threat of nuclear war and its unthinkable global consequences as a threat that is not abating, but mounting. This council has chosen this anniversary and a precarious time to weaken its commitment to the Nuclear Free Zone Act by dissolving the decades-old working relationship between local government and civil society that has distinguished Takoma Park from other nuclear-free zones, indeed internationally. As noted, the city has tasked its lawyer to review and revise what is or is no longer relevant in the Nuclear Free Zone Act. Will the city publish these changes in the municipal ordinance as draft recommendations to allow public review and comment for council consideration well in advance of any vote? Thank you.
Would you
Thank
please
you.
hold the banner up so that all of us can see it and people?
Do we have any other public comments on the nuclear-free proclamation?
Good evening, Council, Mayor, and Council. My name is Reuben Snipper. I live in Ward 5 on Erie Avenue, and I was a member of the Nuclear Free Zone Committee when it first formed in the early 1980s. And I have just a few thoughts. I don't want to take too much of your time. I do thank you for the proclamation. At least that's an acknowledgement of 40 years that we've had the nuclear free zone ordinance in the city. And I confess I was surprised by the decision to disband the committee because Tacoma Park is definitely known as a nuclear free zone. And when many people find where I live, the first thing they say is, oh, that's a nuclear free zone. It kind of defines us. It's part of our identity. Yet the committee was disbanded. I don't know what I'm going to say when I meet people now. I do want to say one of the things that was very unique about the ordinance is that it had a committee that was supposed to implement the law. And one of the main things we undertook right away and did was to help the city not buy from nuclear weapons producers, companies. And over the course of many, many, many years and much discussion, there have only been a few waivers of that. City staff relied on the committee completely to do the work, the research, and followed our recommendations. And I do wonder if the staff really have the time and expertise for this. They certainly did not then. The other thing I want to talk about before my time runs out is that it was a way to educate the public about the impact of nuclear weapons, and many people in Tacoma Park were extremely supportive of it and have been, as you saw in that petition. And then finally, I can't help observing that, as was mentioned, given the wars that are going on now that involve countries with nuclear weapons, including one that has made specific threats about their nuclear weapons, it seems like a lousy time to back off from commitments to reduce that threat, or even the appearance of reducing that threat. Anyway, I want to thank you for all your work on the council. I was on the council for 5 years, and I know how much work it is, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Do you have any additional comments on the nuclear-free proclamation?
Hello, my name's Sharon Levy from Ward 1. I was on the city council from 1984 to 86. So I was on the council when the nuclear free zone proclamation was amended. And I am the wife of one of the originators, and also I wanted to say something that Reuben addressed, and that is knowing the amount of work that all of you do and the hours that it takes. I don't think that's changed that much since the 80s. So I appreciate you thinking at least that the committee, although the committee won't continue, you will be taking over some of the many responsibilities that have been are in the law. But I really doubt sincerely whether you would ever have the time to really fulfill all the amendments, the responsibilities of the law that has been proclaimed. So I'm really wondering who will take that responsibility and how you will manage that. So I think that's what everybody's speaking to. That's kind of a diminution of the law. And I think that's what the 600 people who signed the petition were thinking also, that we're getting a new library, what's going to happen at the junction. I mean, you do a lot of work. And I just would hate to see that this law is weakened during this, not only this time in the world, but for what Tacoma Park stands for. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any additional public comments on the nuclear-free proclamation?
Good evening. Jay Levy, Ward 1. I've been a resident of Tacoma Park for half a century, minus 1 year. And I've been so proud of what's been accomplished by the City Council with the nuclear-free zone resolution, with the work it's done to spread the word, with the fact that we opposed the invasion of Iraq 3 weeks before it happened. We have a 16-year old allowance to vote, and I'm very proud of that, and I'm really ashamed of the fact that you've decided to cut off the Nuclear-Free Zone Committee, which over the years, I've been involved 34 years with it. We've put on dozens and dozens of public events. We've had all kinds of interesting films. We've shown a lot of effort to keep the public informed about nuclear-related issues. And I just wonder who's going to do any of that now? Who has the expertise? We have folks well, the committee is no longer in existence. We have folks who are nationally known for their work in that, and they not only live in Tacoma Park, but their office is in Tacoma Park. Nuclear Information Research Agency, and they are off the committee. And actually, the committee is a statute-related enterprise. In other words, you are supposed to have a committee of 7 people, and ever since about half a year's worth, you've neglected that. It's a requirement. Look at your ordinance. It requires you to have a committee extant, and you haven't done that. You've been out of commission for 5-6 months with us not allowing us to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments on the nuclear-free proclamation? Thank you very much. Any general public comments? I'm so sorry. I skipped the main event. I'm like, what? We're here for MMPA. Public comments on voting items. I'm sorry. Do you have any public comments on voting items?
My name is Jacqueline Moore, and I live in Ward 2. I just wanted to remind staff, council members, and the mayor of the letter signed by 233 Tacoma Park residents from all 6 wards that was sent to the Montgomery County Planning Board and to you regarding our opposition to parts of the minor master plan amendment for Tacoma Park. We asked for changes to the minor master plan to reduce the risk of displacement of residents, which the planning board has admitted will happen, from affordable housing, to reduce the risk of environment, traffic, and infrastructure stress in our community going forward into a climate emergency. Redevelopment is necessary at the former hospital site, and new housing there would be welcome. Rezoning in stages, starting with the hospital site, will allow for careful monitoring of the effects of the thousands of new units that will be going in at the hospital site, at the Purple Line, and around the Tacoma Metro. Your role here as elected officials of our city is clear. That role is to protect our affordable housing and our residents who live there. And that means voting to disapprove this project or to make the necessary language changes to reduce the upzoning. You still have some power. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments on voting items tonight? Public comments on voting items.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Robert Anderson, Woodland Avenue. To win the junction bid, NDC's RFP response showed an on-site loading dock and a building covering maybe 70% of the lot. You can see the loading dock go about middle of the picture. 4 years later, the final submission to the county had a street loading lay-by and covered the entire lot as well as Johnny's Auto Clinic, which they never owned. Developers are powerful, as you can see by the shadows in the drawing. They even moved the sun to travel east to west across the northern rather than the southern sky. It's delightful. In 2017, they warned the council that they could only build using a lay-by. The bold typeface is in their original letter. They said that SHA had no safety concerns about the project. This was proven to be inaccurate at best. The city manager's blog mirrored the NDC inaccuracy. She was misinformed at best. Developers develop. Mark Elrich warned the council to nail things down on the way in. The council then did not listen. And now council has an up to $500,000 amendment to get out of the deal. $500,000 is just under $29 per resident of the city. Man, woman, child, gender neutral, everybody. But to leave the project, paying is probably for the best. Note, though, that staff cheerled the whole way, and some of the same staff are advising you now on the MPA. The MPA, folks assure you, will not harm affordable housing or displace residents on Maple. However, developers maximize profits and will develop to the greatest extent allowed by zoning. You know that. I urge the council to vote to recommend to the county that zoning be appropriate and fair to our diverse city and residents. Don't be misled by promises. Again. And this on a side street in Silver Spring shows what could have been in the junction if it hadn't been for safety professionals at SHA. The city has had difficulty with construction projects. Our current community center, where we are right now, began for a gym never built. The library renovation has turned into a rebuild with large budget overruns. The junction and the rec center, $80,000 for a roof that's going to be torn down in a few years. Where is that project? I hope that the council will protect its most vulnerable residents and vote for an MMPA that protects them and protects the character of Tacoma Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any additional public comments on voting items?
Yes, we do.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Kaufman from Ward 1. I'm speaking on behalf of Tom Gagliardo, who couldn't be here tonight, but I 100% agree with his statement. I want to remind you of what happened here 30 years ago. The Garmesians, who own the shopping mall known as 555 of Edmonton, Alberta, had proposed building a huge complex at the corner of Colesville Road and Georgia Avenue. The company's plans for the 2 million square foot complex included an indoor amusement park, a water park, and a shopping center. 555 is the developer of the world's largest mall in Edmonton, and it's the co-developer of the Mall of America near Minneapolis. Many in Tacoma Park and elsewhere opposed the plan because of, among other concerns, its adverse impact on traffic. It was never built. Why talk about a plan from 30 years ago that was never realized? Because the minor master plan amendments proposed zoning changes would, according to the Washington Business Journal, allow 2 million square feet the same size as 555's proposed mall, to be constructed on the former site of Washington Adventist Hospital and the current location of Washington Adventist University alone. And the MMPA proposes the same CRT zoning category for the hospital and university site as exists for downtown Silver Spring, the center of which is the intersection of Colesville Road and Georgia Avenue. So Tacoma Park may now be building a giant traffic snarling monstrosity like the one we defeated 30 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments on voting items?
Yes, we do. Hello, Mayor and Council. Nice to see you again. John Rogers, Ward 1. I'm here to bear witness to what you are doing in the MMPA. As it is right now, the Maple Avenue corridor is a crown jewel. First, it reminds me of the Rainbow Coalition described by Dr. Jesse Jackson, a man for whose presidential campaign I proudly worked years ago. And second, has the highest concentration of affordable housing in the whole of Montgomery County. And despite this, the planning board and this mayor and council are going to destroy this crown jewel and potentially displace hundreds of renters. The fact of displacement was confirmed by Vice Chair Mitra Pedouim, who said there will be displacement and gentrification under the MMPA. You do know, right, that organized money is colluding to jack up housing rental prices all across America. Just read ProPublica, or look at the media reporting on the lawsuits being brought by progressive lawyers challenging widespread price collusion carried out in violation of antitrust laws. Do you think Tacoma Park and Silver Spring, the rental market, is immune from rental price collusion? So, despite everything, the MMPA does not explicitly provide there will be no displacement. Instead, we get the weak bromides of some ill-defined right of return, and my favorite, the actual plan recommendation on page 76 stays the same and talks about striving to achieve no net loss of affordable housing. You're going to strive and strive and strive to achieve no net loss, whatever that term means. Whatever that term means, it's malleable. Just like the phrase affordable housing, it's malleable. What a great set of weasel words. That's what they are. They're weasel words on the Herculean striving. The Herculean striving involved in this striving. Oh, my goodness, I can't stand it. In other words, if you vote in favor of the current MMPA draft, you are okay with all those people losing their homes in Tacoma Park, and that is not acceptable. It is also unacceptable that the City Council is affirmatively acting to reduce diversity in Tacoma Park. Progressives have long known that a core function of government is, at minimum, to protect the most vulnerable among us from the power of organized money. But I don't see that here. Rather, I see the protection of organized money. By way of background, President Franklin Roosevelt coined the term organized money, and he went to great lengths to warn of the dangers of government by organized money, lessons we would do well to take to heart. I want to end by repeating what I told you the last time I spoke with you. The concept of noblesse oblige holds that to those whom much is given, much is required. Much has been given to you, Mayor and Council, and much is required of you. We are asked by the world's religions to love our neighbors as ourselves. Here is your opportunity, Mayor and Council. I ask you once again to protect the renters in the Maple Avenue corridor and not to forsake them. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments on voting items tonight?
Good evening, Sue Miller, Ward 3. I have 4 outstanding questions on the MMPA. 1, the planning board and staff have never explained why they think Maple Avenue should be disrupted in order to build new units that would not be rent stabilized for 5 years. Why should Maple Avenue shoulder this increased density burden and the inevitable increase in rents? The county's housing department has warned of the rapid disappearance of naturally occurring affordable housing. Why would we want to contribute to that disappearance? 2, no substantive equity questions have been answered by the county planning staff or board or city. They've only kicked the can down the road for the county OLO to answer. Why would we approve a plan that defies the county's new equity policies and the city's? 3, board commissioners have acknowledged that this plan will cause displacement and gentrification, and that there is no guarantee of no net loss of affordable units. And through this process, there's been no actual strengthening of no net loss protection, just suggestions for tools and language that is window dressing. Why would we approve such a plan? And 4, no one has ever explained why they've proposed zoning this area for heights and density found elsewhere in the county only on top of metro stations. Being 15 minutes from a future Purple Line station is not the same thing as being adjacent to a metro station. And in planning board work sessions, when challenged to show comparable zoning somewhere, anywhere, the staff outright refused. This is part of a very obvious pattern of disrespecting the city's requests and authority. Why would you approve such a plan? Tonight, demand a substantive reduction in heights and density in order to reduce the pressure on landlords to sell buildings on Maple. We're counting on you to prevent the displacement that is clearly mapped out in this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments on voting items?
Hello, online there. Sorry, my screen time just got me. My name is Carter Doherty. I'm in Ward 1 on Crescent Place. Thank you for slogging through the whole Tacoma Park minor master plan amendment. It's quite a mouthful and a lot of work. I'm glad you got some useful feedback from the planning board. It's worth mentioning there were voices of support for the plan at the, to the planning board, and there continue to be. I don't speak on behalf of tonight, but I'm involved with the group Tacoma for All, and we, strongly support this process. And reminding you that we elect you for your good judgment and not simply to take a poll of people who show up at meetings. I also think it's worth mentioning, if you think that, and I think this is a very real possibility, that the planning board uses its supermajority to do what it chooses, even if Tacoma Park would object, if you think that's a high likelihood, then better to engage in the process and shape it rather than do something that might perhaps be kind of therapeutic but doesn't get changes down the line and doesn't sort of preserve your voice at the table. On some specific points, I do hope that on the question of diversity of housing, you keep in mind our housing plan. That's been something, and it's not necessarily about packing all affordable housing into one place. It's about a diversity of housing. I think that is important. Rent stabilization, I'm a big fan of it, and I'm glad that you're defending Tacoma Park's rent stabilization ordinance. This is a little bit before my time, but as I understand it, there have from time to time been tweaks to the ordinance in order to encourage investment in existing properties. So I just wouldn't want you to paint yourself into a corner by saying, we would never want to change that. And then just the last thing, a reminder that the zoning plan is a zoning plan and not a site plan, and there will be lots of times if we want to object to people, as I would, building luxury condos. But to get back to the macro question here, we need housing in Montgomery County. We need greater density. It may end up being that it's greater density than we're used to, but I think this is where we need to go if we're going to address the terrible housing shortage in Montgomery County. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments on voting items?
Good evening. My name is Fred Feinstein. I'm Ward 3, where I've been a proud resident for 45 years. I'm here to express my concern about the draft resolution on MMPA. First, though, I want to commend you, the council, for the work that you've put in on this important issue. You've put in good hard work and expressed some serious concerns in your testimony and your statements about the plan. I don't think that we're that far apart in our views, but I'm here to urge you to go beyond expressing concerns. I'm hoping you will include language that clearly states you will not support the county proposal if it does not address the issues you have raised and have been raised here tonight. Specifically, I would hope that you would say in the resolution that a top priority of the plan must, and I use that word must, be no displacement and a net increase in affordable housing. Along the lines of my friend and neighbor, Bob Anderson, for many years I followed the development at the Tacoma Junction. And perhaps some of you remember that I appeared many times, dozens of times, expressing my concern about the NDC proposal. What I was told on many occasions was I should let the proposal go through the process. I was urged to wait and see what the county and SHA had to say. While we waited, of course, as you all know, there were years of contentious and difficult council meetings in front of packed audiences. We waited while the proposal caused controversy and unhappiness on all sides within the community. In the end, after more than 10 years of controversy, the council did the right thing when they withdrew the proposal. But I don't think anyone was happy with the process of waiting. And in the end, unfortunately, the termination of the process will come with a yet determined to be cost to the city. I bring up this history not to rehash the difficult history, but to suggest that we learn from the experience. The council should not just highlight concerns to the county about the proposal, but should state clearly that the city will oppose the proposal unless your concerns are addressed. Don't make the mistake again of letting the process work its way through. Please exercise your responsibility to make your bottom line clear. As I said earlier, I would hope that you would say in the resolution that top priorities of the plan must be no displacement and a net increase in affordable housing. Again, learning from the Junction history, deferring and delaying and relying on the county to address your concerns is likely to cause future controversy. Junction history suggests we all benefit when the council acts decisively and clearly from the outset.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments on voting items?
Good evening. My name is Casey Kostick. I'm a resident of Ward 3. First of all, I want to thank the city staff and the city council for all of your work on the MMP throughout the past months and your attention to a lot of these core issues. I'm here tonight to urge you to adopt the resolution before you on the minor master plan. You have thoroughly reviewed the MMP and made needed changes, including those proposed in the resolution tonight. Those are good changes and improve the plan. I also think the commercial restriction also seems like a positive addition, as long as it continues to allow for housing buildings that do have commercial in them, because those can bring benefits to the residents as well as to the property owners. As I said in my public comments last week, it is important that we focus housing and commercial development in activity centers in our region, not distant locations that require lots of driving and do not provide the neighborhood services and the community that we have here in Tacoma Park. It is also important to ensure housing protections for our residents. And I believe the increased zoning and protections for residents are not mutually exclusive and can be achieved through the MMP and other protections. Additionally, it's important to remember that the MMP has the potential to add additional affordable housing, which is one of our goals as a community. Please take action tonight to vote in support of the resolution. And then I hope you will all have an opportunity to vote on the resolution for a recess and take some needed rest time. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments on voting items? Come on down.
Good evening. My name is David Reed. I live in Ward 2. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the mayor and to the members of the city council for their dedication and in trying to analyze and understand the complexities of this proposal. I truly thank you for your diligence and commitment. In my prior public comments on the MMPA, I've underscored two themes. One, I am committed to promoting housing opportunities for low and moderate income families and to opening new commercial opportunities in the planned area. Second, I do not believe that the County Planning Board can or has reflected the interests of Tacoma Park. And I hold that view because staff tried to compress the review and approval process. Staff consistently misrepresented the views of residents along Maple Avenue. Staff failed to present basic information on climate, displacement, transportation, costs of social benefits, among others that are required for serious analysis of the plan. Staff has proposed upzoning framework that is essentially imported from downtown Silver Spring. The Planning Board has largely disregarded the requests for changes set forth by you, City Council, and only its last hearing did the board finally recognize the obvious uncertainty of displacement of low and middle income families. It is clear that the Planning Board is driven by county's interest and not by the priorities of Tacoma Park. And clearer still is the staff's arrogance in imposing its values and designs on our municipality. As an economist, I do not subscribe to the view embraced by those who believe that bigger and denser are always better. I believe that creating new commercial opportunities and providing new housing, including the missing middle, can be accomplished without extreme densification and without undermining the ethos and values which distinguish Tacoma Park from neighboring jurisdictions. While my views on a number of proposals have changed over the past months, I strongly encourage the City Council to establish 3 specific conditions only under which the Council should express support for the amendment. And those conditions are to reduce the heights on Site 23, the hospital grounds, to 75 feet, to reduce the height limit on Maplewood Erie Center area to 35 feet, and to maintain current height and density limits on Maple and the avenues. These conditions, I believe, will encourage housing and commercial development, to which I am committed. And those 3 conditions will help the city embrace rather than resist necessary changes. Further, those conditions will prevent displacement and the erosion of the values that define Tacoma Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments on voting items?
I don't know if I should ask you or Irma.
I got your note,
requested-
5 minutes.
I
got you.
I've worked it down hard.
No worries.
I'm very
You
grateful.
have approval
And
for your
I'm
5.
Sorry to be a persistent pest at times.
No
but
worries.
People need to be represented by somebody. At any rate, Paul Hubner, good evening, Mayor and Council, Ward 3. Tonight, I am presenting a portion of Francis Phipps' excellent analysis of the minor master plan amendment, Tacoma Park's legal right to design its own future. Francis is a recently retired planning consultant who has written and directed the development and approval of multiple large and small award-winning projects on both coasts. She is a 53-year resident of Tacoma Park, and a copy of her complete comments have been already sent to members of the council and the mayor. It begins, zoning is the most important, most potent tool officials have in defining an area's future. It locks in legal rights regarding land use and development that run with the land until that zoning is changed. As a small jurisdiction within a larger county, our charter does not provide us with the zoning powers, but relies upon the county for this service. However, Maryland Land Use Code Statute 24202 states 2/3 of the majority vote of both the district council and the county planning board is required to take any action relating to zoning within the city of Tacoma Park that is contrary to a resolution of the mayor and city council. And 2/3 majority of the county planning board is required to take any action relating to land use planning within the city of Tacoma Park that is contrary to the resolution of the mayor and city council. These resolutions 2023 in September specifically requested that the Montgomery County Planning Board, quote, ensure that the MMPA address 7 priorities. incentivizing the creation of a range of housing types, retaining and improving existing affordable housing, retaining existing and attracting new local businesses, creating new public space opportunities, strengthening social and environmental factors, continuing engagement at the planning review process, and assessing the impact of increasing residential units and retail on the provision of public services in the planned area, end quote. The mayor, in her excellent testimony before the planning board, reiterated these concerns and expressly stated, quote, however, the plan needs to be revised to better reflect the city's values, as well as ensure that the plan takes the necessary steps to protect the most vulnerable among us, end quote. The planning staff at its November 16th work session acted as though none of the mayor's requests needed to be fulfilled. Time after time at this third work session, staff waved off the city's concern as unnecessary and stated that, quote, the language of the plan stands, end quote. The city cannot be bludgeoned into agreeing to this attack on our clearly stated values of equity, inclusion, and affordable housing. There are multiple ways to guarantee no net loss, but this plan does not mention any of them. That is because this is not a plan, but rather a redevelopment strategy dependent on assignment of the highest possible zoning to create more private market apartments. The city, at tonight's meeting, should pass a new resolution which restates the mayor's official testimony, rejecting the approval of the existing draft plan and required additional analysis that meets the city's resolution requirements of 2023-33. This analysis should specifically include a new comprehensive impact analysis and alternate zoning which protects our vulnerable residents and reflects the values of our city. As stated above, the passage of this resolution would trigger the requirement for a 2/3 vote of the board to approve the draft plan against the city's clearly stated wishes. Tacoma Park is a legally incorporated jurisdiction with its own governance. The state has given our city government the statutory right to have the final say in designing its future. The city has already gone on record in its resolution as rejecting the MMPA as written. To reinforce its position, the city should adopt a new brief resolution incorporating by reference its resolution 2023-33 and the mayor's official testimony and reject the draft and request additional analysis. The city has the legal and moral authority to reject this plan. I urge you to do so. Those are the words of Francis Phipps, and many of us that have read this are in strong compliance and support of her. Do you want? Yeah, this is a little bit different. It's truncated.
Thank you. Do we have any additional public comments on voting items? Any virtual public comments on voting items? Okay. Ms. Cordes? You have the floor.
Good evening, Colleen Cordes, Ward 1. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Please delete the word support from your resolution title. Make it just resolution on the planning board draft, etc. Please rewrite your first be it resolved. It's a strategic error to declare you support this plan with just a few conditions. To trigger the state law requiring the planning board to muster a supermajority to approve anything you oppose, you should clearly state you oppose the plan unless certain changes are made. Don't signal to the county council that you're pleased with the board's meager changes. Many conditions still need to be added. I just have time to list 4. 1, maintain existing height and density limits on Maple and Lee. 2, raise the 12.5% requirement for MPDUs to at least 15%. 3, reduce the actual proposed new zoning for the part of new construction that can be commercial significantly below the 100% level. And 4, stipulate that the top housing priorities for the plan area are no displacement of current residents and a net increase in affordable housing. If a majority of council also wants to prioritize middle income housing, then require the top priorities to be no displacement and a net increase in both affordable and middle income housing across the planned area. You asked the board to provide more details about the outreach to Maple residents during development of the plan's vision. Instead, the board tells you to read the July appendix on engagement, ignoring we all read that months ago and found it lacking. This shows disrespect not just for you, Mayor Searcy, and City Council, but especially to Maple Avenue residents. It's obvious that Maple residents were not told about the staff's intentions to upzone their neighborhood, but Ford showed up in the draft plan. And then no one asked residents of this very diverse, deeply affordable neighborhood what they thought about that idea. It's unbelievable that in 2023, a major agency in our progressive county could operate in this patriarchal, systemically racist way. Systemic racism doesn't have to be intentional to perpetuate harm. The Down County Chief of Planning called this Maple neighborhood a unique, affordable housing resource that other parts of Down County are clamoring to get. Let's treat it that way. How dare the county gamble with its future by proposing such dramatic upzoning that could turn it into a far denser high-rise canyon with prices for any new market rate housing beyond what many current residents could afford. Please oppose the plan without the many necessary changes residents are calling for. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we have no more public comments on voting items virtually. Okay. We're going to move on to general public comments. Do we have any general public comments this evening? Going once. Paul,
Yes.
you had 5 minutes. Come on. I'm joking. I'm joking.
The first thing I want to do is thank you for the 5 minutes. I'm very grateful. And I didn't get an answer from Jesse, and I didn't know how to get in touch with you, Irma. But I want to say that I was talking to our great sound man. I don't mean to put him in the soup, but they're doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing on his street where I lived as a kid, 14th and Euclid. They got rid of the Section 8 building, and they're going to develop it. And I told him they're going to buy his whole neighborhood. And they chased us out of there, and this will happen. And I'm speaking from bitter, bitter experience. And I just want you to know that, I mean, I worked for developers, and I had the owner tell me, well, just get rid of her and keep going. Get rid of her. And this was about a woman who was a local architect who came and complained about this historic building. These things will and do happen. And there is big money. Kushner is spending $2 billion in buying up parts of Baltimore to redevelopment. Do you think he's redeveloping for the people that live there? I don't. I don't trust him any more than his father-in-law. And I just think that this is such an important issue, and it's going to affect people's lives. When I worked in the Franklin and I met some of those people, I think they'd be hard-pressed to move, much less move back. And I just, there but for the grace of God. That's what my mom told me. That's all I can pass on to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any general public comments? General. Come on down.
My name is Declan. I live in Ward 1. Thank you, Tacoma Park, for a fun night at Chuck E. Cheese's with our police department, and a special thank you to Kathy Plevey for organizing. Have a happy, late Christmas. Thank you.
Do we have any additional general public comments? Okay. Do we have any
Yes.
general public comments virtually?
Yes.
Ms. Machui?
Hello? Can you hear me?
We can't hear you just yet. I think we can work on that, though.
I unmuted
We can hear
myself.
you now.
Thank you. I have a residual COVID cost, so I won't be very long speaking because I start coughing. I'm tested negative, though. Anyways, I have been a resident of Ward 2 since 1985. My son was born here that year. In 2015, I co-founded Parents of Special Needs Adults with the late Dr. Wolfgang Mergner. But tonight, I am advocating for low-income homeowners, especially Black Americans and/or those with disabilities. We are very vulnerable. On my block, to be more specific, at 401 Boyd Avenue, I have been saddened by the knockdown of a modest house, which dislocated some people who were very nice neighbors, had to be forced out. And it has been gentrified into a 5 to 6 bedroom, 5 to 6 bathroom house, selling for, get this, $1.7 million. This house could be a home for my son and others like him. To keep my sanity, I gave my parents of special needs adults card to the agent. I don't know if you can see it. At the open house I attended with my friend Doris Rogers. To keep my sanity, I tried to keep my hope up. I'm still hoping for a miracle. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
And
Michui.
enjoy the Gemini meteor showers and happy holidays.
Same to you, Ms. Michui. Okay, we're going to move on to council comments. Do we have any council comments? Councilmember Small?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate this, and I'll do my best to comport myself in the allotted time. But there are a lot of things happening within our purview, and so I wanted to make sure that I got to at least a couple of them at once. And I think it's important to know that I'd like to say this. It's never good to blame the people who are in the caboose for any given train wreck. And I say that because there are always reasons why any given group of people who have come up to analyze any number of train wrecks are asked to do that. Generally speaking, when we're talking about government, we're talking about oversight and accountability, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that because we're talking about government in general and laws. And when we're implementing those things, we're actually talking about a thing more like accountability and the reasons why people would desire to be in government. I myself, I went to law school. I have always been involved in these sorts of leadership kinds of things. And so my perspective on government and accountability is with regard to both oversight and making sure that you are not in trouble in any way. Some people come at it in terms of what the plans say because they look at it in terms of the blocks that move around. Some people come at it in terms of organizing, and so they're concerned about the people. But I think at the end of the day, you'd like to think that all those areas you can provide some sort of expertise into a dialogue that is constructive and then concludes in a process or a number of processes all at once. That are valuable to the community as a whole and the future of that community. Because progress is, I guess, always in the eye of the beholder. And when you look through the documents that we are dealing with or the issues that we put to bed as of late, I think the thing that rings through all of them, if you give a careful review, is there are a lot of accountability issues that this city has decided, for whatever reason, to avoid, whether that be internally within the government structures or with regard to the way we have these dialogues, so there's not a direct interchange or discussion immediately after, or the ability to follow up just by the sheer volume of things that are happening at any given point. The lawyer being exceedingly busy on other things, that kind of thing. But I do think that if you were to look at this document in conjunction with the minor master, or with the public space management plan, and you're to think about the concentrations of wealth that are so concerning to the people that are in here by and large when taxes come around. And you juxtapose that with the opportunity of natural engine that kind of used to be here because people wouldn't like to stay here over time until the schools got really nice. And the opportunities or lack thereof in all of those homes for middle-class people to come in and send their kids to a wonderful school that's already overcrowded. And I guess I would close by saying that as you look at these things and you start to discuss expertise, the ability to diagnose an issue or to come up with a solution can either be intuitive or deductive or training or skill or art. But the ability to participate in that conversation in a fair and even-handed manner with the people who you're having those conversations with is a trust thing. And I am thankful to the residents of Ward 6 that have entrusted me, based on the things that I've learned, to make this decision. And I am thankful that we have had measured conversations about these things before we take these votes. With regard to my previous statements, I'd just like to say again, I have found everything that the Nuclear-Free Tacoma Committee has said to be exceedingly eloquent. I am more concerned about whether or not we actually do a resolution on war, but we're not. We probably won't, because as things move on, the appetite for people to do profoundly declarative things with their municipal government changes through no fault of the people who were here before or no fault of appetite of the people who are here. But there are some restrictions and some shackles about the way in which we have to do these things that I would hope that people appreciate as we move forward. So thank you.
Councilmember Gibson?
Yes, thank you. And Mayor, I'll too take just a little bit more time than the 3 minutes normally. I want to first thank the public commenters whose eloquence I can't compete with. I will give my 3 minutes or plus worth here about the minor master plan, but I thank the many folks that commented tonight and have commented a long time about this subject. The minor master plan is primarily a zoning proposal. It's targeted for growth and increased development flexibility. The scale, however, is arguably extreme in terms of density, heights, and uses. This appeals to some as a great way to increase our housing options, especially at the hospital site, while more moderated approaches are suggested in the Maple Avenue district. Seeking other zoning alternatives, the City Council did request of the Planning Board to provide some lower density options and zoning comparisons. Unfortunately, this information was not provided. Many residents, including myself, want increased housing opportunities, but at a scale more compatible with our city's values and the size of the neighborhoods. Specifically, I see a need for lower density and more explicit protections for our residents in the Maple Avenue district, an already densely populated neighborhood. To this point, upzoning and the consequent financial incentives may put the smaller commercial properties there, those not owned by nonprofits, at greater risk of buyout and resident displacement. Proposed language changes to protect current renters are not adequate, in my opinion. I believe zoning changes are needed. I also reject the ruling or its interpretation that the City Council must vote on a plan without receiving requested and arguably critical traffic, environmental, and school population information. The stated potential of up to 3,500 more housing units would be consequential in terms of infrastructure, quality of life, and financial impacts on the city. The county stands to gain from increased property taxes as the city does, but the county bears little of the costs of those impacts. The requested but not provided environmental information that the council needs to make an informed decision would include an accurate greenhouse gas inventory and measures to reach net zero sustainability targets, and 2, assessment of Brashear's drainage basin, including an updated flood mitigation plan and forecast of impacts of regional development. The risk of not having detailed information on current conditions or projections before our vote is that we may compromise our future. I believe it reflects a structurally flawed planning process that does not recognize us as those who will live with and pay for any negative consequences. Tonight, the council will exercise its right to make changes, accept or reject the plan. Later, the county council, with your input, will make the final decision. Regardless of the outcome, the city must then proactively focus its planning and resources on collaborative ways to move forward to meet our stated housing and environmental goals. This must include protecting both our current residents and attracting new ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. I do just want to remind my colleagues on council that we have 4 agenda items for tonight. You will have ample time to discuss your opinions on MMPA when we get to that agenda item. And so I would encourage everyone to use your 3 minutes to talk about other things besides the MMPA, because you will have plenty of time to do that. Councilmember DeBall.
Thank you, Mayor. I do plan to discuss my views on the minor master plan when we get that far. But I do want to thank everybody who came out to speak, particularly folks who have dedicated so much time to the nuclear-free issue in this community over the many years you have. I do appreciate it, and I do see that as separate from discussions we've had about the ordinance in the committee part of the ordinance. So I do want to express my appreciation to all of you. But I also do want to say that with respect to specifically the comments on the minor master plan, I think it is entirely possible on this important issue for people to agree to disagree. And I'm disappointed that some folks have chosen to attach personal comments that I take very personally, take offense at, to their comments about any view I might have about the plan. I was disappointed to hear a hiss when somebody was speaking. I'm just troubled by that aspect of the comment on this. I understand passions run high on both sides. I understand there's more than one side. And it's our job up here to listen to everybody and to do ultimately what we think is right. I did attend the COG annual meeting today, and someone who was being honored for being in service for 28 years on the COG board said exactly that ultimately the job is to listen, to explain our positions. That does not mean that we have to keep explaining until you hear what you want to hear, and ultimately to do what we believe is right and vote based on that independently of what? Commercial, neighbor, all sorts of other influences around us. And so I just wanted to say that, and I'll talk about the plan later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Councilmember Fulcher.
Thank you. We're heading into the holidays for a lot of us. And if we haven't personally met, my name is Shayna. I am an optimist who walks through life just filled with gratitude, and that's who I am. There is not another city that I would accept living in. My husband doesn't necessarily feel as strongly about living in Takoma Park as I do. And so when we had our 4th child, he was ready to pack up and move somewhere else. And I do live in one of the houses that people say, oh, you know, that's a nice starter home, but we couldn't afford to buy a bigger house, and so we added on to our house. And I don't see stopping people from adding on to their homes as a way that we're going to solve a housing crisis of affordability. The county didn't make the affordable housing that we have in Tacoma Park happen through zoning, and they're not going to solve our missing middle housing problem for us either. I'm excited that Habitat for Humanity has opened up 2 homes in our community, but my understanding is that those are houses number 62 and 63 in Montgomery County since Habitat for Humanity started in our community in 1982. And so that's not going to fix our problem. I was talking to Councilmember Hanzak, and we were talking about that what we're looking at right now is zoning that puts more dense housing in an area that's already very dense, that we both very much support the work that Habitat just did, that we are eager to see what the city can do to support duplexes through allowing the dividing of lots, which was very complicated in Tacoma Park. And I believe that our housing and community development staff will be able to help us find other ways to address what is not a zoning issue in order to address our housing needs in Tacoma Park. And that's all I'm going to say, because I don't want to get too close to MMP stuff right now.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Councilmember Hanzak.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm also not going to touch MMPA just yet because I've spent several hours today preparing some remarks on that, and I think we're going to get to it. I hope there will still be people left in the auditorium when we get to that. So just briefly, I want to first say thank you very much. I think this is the largest showing of folks we've had in this room since we got on council a year ago. It's beautiful to see. It's beautiful to hear to my ears. I really think it's this is the life of Tacoma Park, this vibrant civic life that makes it so wonderful to live here. I just, one of my Ward 5 residents who also used to be on council, Ruben Snipper, is here tonight. And you said it seems like a lousy time to pull back on the nuclear proliferation, and I want to thank you for spending some time one-on-one with me when I reached out and asked if you would talk to me about your history on the committee. I'm a new member of council. I was placed on the subcommittee, and I want to quote my fellow council member here about the caboose. We are the caboose in this instance, as we are on several issues that have come to the table. I think almost every big issue that's on our plates right now, and there are multiple, we've been juggling with the tail end of this, and it's intense. And I just want to say these are really tough choices. They really keep me up at night. I spend hours, going back and forth trying to figure out what's right, what's just, what is also representative of the people. And I'll get into that with MMPA in a minute. But I just want to assure you that we are trying our very, very best to maintain both the integrity of the past and what we have been, but also moving forward. And we are trying our best. Yes, it is a lousy time. I will agree with you. It's a lousy time. We're in the middle of some of the worst times I've lived through in my 50 years of life in terms of the conflict in our world. At the same time, I think there were very good reasons to move forward in this instance, and because our city is changing, and I won't get into it beyond that. But thank you for coming out and sharing your views, and thank you for your passion. And I really do believe that I am still proud to say that we live in a nuclear-free city, and I hope that you can be too. And I don't think that diminishes anything about the committee members themselves and all the integrity that the city has and that the members have. And I hope you will still proudly come out and organize events, and we will support you in doing so. That is what makes our society so wonderful and beautiful. Thank you.
Just gonna triple check with Councilmember Siemens. Can't see a hand. Are you good? Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna first start by thanking everyone for coming out tonight. We really appreciate hearing from everyone. I want to echo the proclamation language wasn't fluff around Sincere's deepest appreciation. That was something I wanted to make sure was in there because we truly appreciate all of the commitment the Nuclear Free Committee has put in over the years. I do want to answer your question, which was very straightforward and clear. I know you're all are wondering, like, what are you going to tell me when the ordinance is going to be up? We are hoping to have that on the agenda in January. So it'll be on the agenda in January for the code language. So it will be posted, so you will have an opportunity to provide feedback on that. But in addition to that, I think it's important to make sure that what you said was very true. Being a nuclear-free city is in our identity. It's in our DNA. And that's not going to go away. I think one of the major challenges that we faced with the Nuclear Free Committee is recruitment. I'm going to be 100% transparent. And so I think the charge for all of us is to try to figure out, and maybe, unfortunately, the times that we're in may motivate and get more people riled up to say, hey, this is something we want to do in our community. So I definitely, again, appreciate all of the hard work that the Nuclear Free Committee has put in. Definitely want to continue to serve as an ally in supporting education events within the city. So send those emails when there are things, hey, Mayor, let's write a letter on this, like send me the notes. I've signed up for listservs now to be a part of different types of learning series on the matter. So I want to make sure that I'm informed about what's going on. And I think that's a commitment that many of us on council are willing to make in order to ensure that nothing falls through the cracks politically. But I do think it's important for us to make sure that we're all being mindful of what some of the major challenges were, which was related to recruitment. But hold us accountable as it pertains to the code language. And if there's anything that you see that's missing, please let us know. Another thing that I want to bring up, again, another non-MMPA issue, is the bomb threat that happened over the weekend. I want to send my sincerest appreciation to our Tacoma Park Police Department, all of their partners, Montgomery County Police, Prince George's County, who brought out K-9 units to help us with searching the area. I understand it was a tremendous undertaking, but I think in addition to the work that folks had to put in order to investigate the threat, which was incredible, but what it did was shook some of the confidence of members of our community, particularly our LGBTQ plus families and community members and visitors, in terms of questioning their safety in Tacoma Park. So I do want to encourage everyone to be supportive of your neighbors during this time. We are committed to making sure that every single person who is in the city of Tacoma Park feels safe and secure, regardless of your race, gender, sexual identity, gender orientation, sexual orientation. None of that matters here. And it's critically important that we make sure that we're providing that safe environment. So the police chief and I are also willing to work with trying to ensure that that takes place. So if there are any groups or organizations that are having events and you have any questions regarding your security or safety, please just reach out. The police chief is definitely willing to, if we need to send people around in order to make sure that officers around to make sure that people feel safe when they're gathering during this time, we want to provide that to you. So please let us know. Thank you. Another thing that, while we're on the police, thank you to the police department for Chuck E. Cheese. Unfortunately, I was editing resolution language, but I'm so grateful to have our young commenter to come out and talk about how great it was. So definitely want to send a big shout out to the police department for that. And then lastly, I had an opportunity to go to the ribbon cutting for the Garland Habitat for Humanity. It feels like ages ago, but it was what, Friday? Was it Friday? Yeah. But definitely want to send my sincerest appreciation to our HCD staff, to Habitat for Humanity staff. Like, this was a labor of love, and it required not only partnerships across the board, but also patience. Like, they worked through this through the pandemic, and it actually, I'll talk about the minor master plan later, but that project was a prime example of how we must, as a community, while it's important to make sure that we're protecting people in the places that they are right now financially, and they have affordable housing, but we also have to create these pathways for people when they're ready to grow out of that. And one of the families is a Tacoma Park resident who is growing out into home ownership opportunities. And so it's important when we're talking about what we are trying to do as a community, and when we're talking about diversification, that we're not just thinking about, it's very important, making sure that we have affordable rental housing for those that have the least among us. But we have to also make sure that we are keeping in mind how we can create pathways so that they can become our peers. So it's not that they have less than us, but they are alongside us. And that means jobs, that means creating pathways for housing, that means making sure they can be your neighbor, and what can we do to create that, right? So the Garland project, we'll hear about it a little bit later because we got to vote on some stuff, but was just such a beautiful example of how we should really, as a community, make sure that we're thinking through the entire spectrum of the needs of our community and the residents within it. And so I think that is it. We'll talk about all of the aspects of city manager, acting city manager, the city manager search update. Do you have that in your comments?
I don't have anything.
I gotta say it. That's right. I was sorry, y'all. I got a lot of different pieces of paper. All right. So, city manager search update. Thank you to everyone that participated on, that was Monday, to all of the festivities regarding our city manager search. We truly, truly, truly appreciate the resident engagement, the engagement from the committee staff as well as our staff in that process. And so the council also conducted interviews on Tuesday. And so we are still turning over some things, and we'll reach a decision regarding the city manager shortly. So stay tuned. There'll be more to come on that. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Acting City Manager Mr. Eubanks for city manager comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council and members of the public and city staff. The City Clerk's Office is accepting applications to fill mid-year vacancies on city boards and committees. There are vacancies on the Arts and Humanities Committee, Board of Elections, Commission on Landlord-Tenant Affairs, Emergency Preparedness Committee, Ethics Commission, Grants Review Committee, Recreation and Community Engagement Committee, Sustainable Maryland Committee, and the Tree Commission. The application form is available on the city website, and a link will be posted with the city manager's comments. Board and committee members are eligible to receive a stipend of $40 per meeting attended. The application deadline is Wednesday, January 10th, 2024. Please contact your city council member or Jesse Carpenter at 301-891-7267 or Jesse C. at tacomaparkmd.gov with questions. The Tacoma Police Department, in partnership with the Adventist Church, the Tacoma Park Volunteer Fire Department, and others, is collecting clean, gently used, warm coats in any size from infant to adult. The coats will be donated to people in need. By simply donating coats and jackets that you no longer need, you will make a difference in the lives of others. We will also accept clean, gently used gloves or mittens and scarves. We can only accept hats if they are new and unopened. There's a large box in the lobby of the Tacoma Park Police Department at 7500 Maple Avenue and will remain in the lobby until Friday, December 29th at 4 p.m. The Tacoma Park Police Department will ensure that they are given to those in need during and after the drive. Give warmth to those in need this winter, and thank you for your generosity. The Tacoma Park Volunteer Fire Department and the Tacoma Park Police Department have teamed up once again for the annual toy drive, which will run through December 20th, 2023. Toys or gift cards can be dropped off at the volunteer station at 7201 Carroll Avenue or the police department here in the community center. Donations are appreciated in the form of new and unwrapped toys or gift cards. If you are donating a gift card, please drop it off at the police administrative window in an envelope addressed to Lieutenant Cynthia Williams, Toy Drive. And as a reminder, the police department can only accept new, unopened toys. We appreciate the generosity for used toys, but we cannot accept them. Today, Governor Wes Moore announced $63.7 million in fiscal year 2024 awards for 7 state revitalization programs administered by the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. This includes the National Capital Strategic Economic Development Fund, otherwise known as NED, to which the city applies annually. This year, of the 3 programs submitted, the city was awarded $175,000 to support the rehabilitation of 73 Carroll Avenue for the expansion of local business Richards School of Music, and another $250,000 for funds to match city ARPA dollars that support weatherization, energy efficiency, and electrification improvements to preserve affordable, small-scale, rent-stabilized multifamily properties. Thank you to HCD staff for coordinating the effort, and congratulations on the allocation. And that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
So two grants.
We got 2 out of 3.
2 out of the 3.
Awesome.
175 and 250. Pretty good.
Good job. All right. Well, I promised my colleagues that we would take a break at 9. Yeah. Did you say, oh, good? All right. So we're going to take a break before we go into our voting session. So we'll take a 15-minute break. All right, we're back on. Okay, we're moving, just as a reminder for folks, we've had to reorder the voting session for this evening. The first item for discussion is a resolution authorizing the use of the FY 2022 State Revitalization Program National Capital Strategic Economic Development Fund grant award funds to ensure affordability of 7402 and 7406 Garland Avenue. So with that, I'll turn things over to the acting city manager, Mr. Eubanks, to introduce this project with staff.
Thank you, Mayor. And Acting Director Collar is available. I'm just going to do a very brief summary, and if there are any additional questions, Acting Director is here to answer. So 7402 Garland Avenue was acquired by the city via the city's tenant opportunity to purchase law back in 2020. The city assigned its opportunity to purchase to Habitat for Humanity, a local affordable housing developer, for the renovation of the property into a duplex homeownership opportunity for the two families that the mayor had mentioned earlier. And on July 28th of 2021, the City Council enacted a resolution that gave support to a grant application to NED grants, the grants that we just received 2 awards for, to support the acquisition of the properties. And as a result of the resolution, we received $500,000 in total. And so this resolution will allow the city to utilize those dollars to provide 2 loans to the 2 families at 7402 Garland Avenue and 7406 Garland Avenue for an equal amount, $150,000 to one family and $150,000 to the other family, for a total of $300,000 and total loan proceeds or subsidy. The dollars that have been put into the project that originally came from the Housing Reserve Fund will be reimbursed, and so the only commitment to the project is the net grant dollars, again for a total of $300,000. That's all I have.
Okay, great. So again, just for members of council, this is just so that we can authorize the allocation of the grant funds to the project. So would someone like to move the resolution?
I would like to move.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Are there any points of discussion?
I would just like to say that I was gonna double check to make sure that the housing fund is being reimbursed.
Yes, and
because
those
I
proceeds go back to the Housing Reserve.
have had some questions, but I would just like to say housing interventions are expensive and they're complicated, and I appreciate that we tried this, that we did this, and I'm looking forward to 2 happy families, as the mayor said, a couple of people who were renting who can now have the opportunity to pay a little bit less than $1.76 million for a house. And to just again to say that I've looked at a lot of the details, and Ward 2 residents who've had questions about this come to me for explanations on some of the details and questions that have been floating around on the listserv. Thank you.
Councilmember Fulcher?
Oh, I didn't mean to do that, but I mean, I will just say I really hope that that we're able to build on this relationship and on the learning experience, and that's my hope about all of the work that I know that you did in HCD for these 2 houses to be in Tacoma Park, that this was a learning experience that we are going to just expand upon. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I just want to echo my appreciation from what I've learned about this project. It started before the pandemic, and it's nice to know that this is the final step that we need to take to bring in 2 wonderful families to the community. So Super excited about this. I think this sets the stage for a number of other types of projects that we can do going forward. One of the things I do like to stress is the importance of having money in the housing reserve so that you can match monies that you may need for grants and float different projects when you're waiting on funds to come through. But also just the need for partnership and innovative thought around how to address the housing crisis in our city. And you all have done all of those things. So thank you so much. And so now, just want to go ahead and move into the vote, seeing no more additional lights. All right, all those in favor of the resolution authorizing the use of FY22 State Revitalization Program National Capital Strategic Economic Development Fund, NED Grant Award funds to ensure the affordability of 7402 and 7406 Garland Avenue, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Do we have any opposed? Any abstain? All right, it moves.
I don't know if you want to do a roll call, only because we
Oh.
have two council members.
I heard them loud and clear, but we could do a roll call.
I did
Just-
too, but maybe.
Yep. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Aye.
Councilmember Fulcher,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala,
Aye.
Councilmember Small,
Absent.
Councilmember Honsack,
Aye.
Councilmember Siemens,
Aye.
Councilmember Gibson.
Aye.
Wonderful. And thank you, Irma. We'll do roll calls for all of these today. All right, so we're going to move on to the main event. Minor master plan amendments. All right, Mr. Cowler. So I can kind of kick us off a little bit if that's okay with folks. So recognize that there was some resolution language that was proposed a little later in the process. In some instances, they were incorporated into the markup. In other instances, they may have conflicted a little bit, but we think we've gotten to the point where there's some clear consensus. Just in terms of how we're going to do this evening, first, I do just want to confirm that we have no friendly amendments. Well, after we move, I'm just giving everyone the lay of the land. That we have no friendly amendments to the preamble language, the whereas clauses that folks should have seen, and that if there's points of discussion, we're talking about conditions. Okay. All right. So it sounds, from the silence, it sounds like we will focus on the conditions language and making sure that those points are clear. So with, I also, before we get into the movement of the resolution, I've asked for our HCD staff to be available in case there are any specific questions for them before we get into discussions around the conditions. So are there any questions or comments that they need to address, or can we just move straight into the conditions? Councilmember Small.
For the good of the order, I did have a request because we had a conversation regarding a couple of specific issues. And while we did receive emails about it, it's not unreasonable to just tell everybody what the result of that conversation was concerning the CRT designation, the CR designation, and what level of or propensity toward public benefit would be available. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Ira Keller, Acting Director, Housing Community Development. So last week during the work session, there was some discussion about specifically on the Flower Avenue district. One portion, the hospital portion, Site 23, has a CR zoning designation. The remainder have CRT zoning designations, and there was a back and forth around, what was the appropriate designation, how did that impact public benefits. And so we got some clarity from planning board staff, and they emphasized that the CR zoning designation was important for two reasons in particular. One, we've talked a little bit about kind of sketch plan and then site plan design and site-wide sketch plan. The CR designation is the tool that enables that sketch plan designation. And secondarily, because of, so we've talked about standard method and optional method development and the triggers for optional method development. And that trigger is slightly looser in a CRT zone. So in a CRT zone, the trigger is a density, an FAR of 1.0. So if a development, it's a little more complicated than this, but just to kind of summarize briefly, if a development is being developed for under 1.0 FAR in a CRT zone, they could conceivably do that through standard method development and thus have no obligation to provide public benefit, all the stuff we want to see. Within a CR zone, that distinction is at 0.5 FAR. So it's a much lower threshold before you have to do optional method and provide public benefit, as well as all the additional pieces that comes with optional method development. So because the site is currently only proposed for zoning of density of 1.25, there definitely is a far more conceivable way to do a development that doesn't cross that 1.0 threshold, whereas it would be exceptionally difficult to fully develop the site and not exceed that 0.5 FAR threshold. So that was kind of the strong feedback we received from planning board staff kind of around the discussion and that we shared with council afterwards.
And then as a follow-up to that, Ira, and then I will back away from the burning wick on whatever this is that we're doing. Can you then speak to the fact that under this designation proposed at the Adventist site, what current constraints there would be with regard to the verticality of any given building that would currently be anticipated to be developed on that site?
Sure. So as we kind of discussed both during the session and then in our follow-ups, the proposed mapped height on any site is the allowable developable height, right? So for example, site 23 on the hospital site itself currently has a proposed mapped height of 120 feet. The only ways to exceed that height are by offering additional MPDU density over the required 12.5%, and there is a formula within the zoning ordinance that I believe we've shared in some of our blog posts that kind of outlines how much more density you get to increase that, and the extra density that you get could be an added height. So that is really the only way to kind of increase the mapped height. Optional method allows you other things to explore, but it is not strictly about the height of the property. The mapped height is the mapped height regardless of whatever else you're trying to do on the property.
So then procedurally, what you were saying then is that in order to obtain a variance from 10 stories or less and thereby trigger all of the development review processes associated with said variance, the absolute allowable height on the site would be essentially 12 stories. 10 to 12 stories.
Correct, though again, the trigger for the optional method development is actually much lower than that. If we maintain the CR designation, the trigger for that, even if you don't go to 120 feet, you still are required to do optional method if you are doing more than 0.5 FAR regardless.
So then there is a distinction to be made between what is allowed on the map and what the hopeful future of any given developer is. Because theoretically, a developer could come in and say, I would like to do the maximum allowable height available to me by my building materials and this designated zoning. And then that would trigger any number of other mechanical processes, including whatever review we have.
Yes, site plan review, the development process review that we explored a few weeks ago.
And then I guess my last thing about this would be, notwithstanding whatever the rules are that are placed on the zoning. So if we are at CR and we are also talking about some rezonings along Maple and other things, in general, at any given point, when there is a development made under those proposed changes, at the point at which they become in effect, that there are additional bites at the apple for review that are inherent to the process, and that no one is going to surreptitiously and suddenly develop a thing that there is absolutely no oversight and control over with regard to either the esteemed members of the flogging committee or the floggers at any given point along the way, because we do have an active dissent as a component part of our city. And so I would like for someone to say explicitly where the touch points could be that would prevent someone from being displeased about what is going on in their neighborhood. And then I will back away.
Certainly. So the same supermajority authority that we've talked about as it relates to land use decisions also applies during any sort of individual site development review process. And this was the presentation that we received a few weeks ago that kind of outlined where in those processes the city, due to our MOU with the planning board based on that zoning ordinance, has the right to weigh in and have the same kind of process and dialogue as we have now.
Councilmember DeBala?
Yeah, so just in terms of conversations that took place between last Wednesday and this Wednesday, just to touch on a couple of other technical issues. So we had a conversation about MPDUs, moderately priced dwelling units. And correct me, Director Keller, if I haven't got this right, but the county definition and the city definition of affordable are not the same. The county definition is higher, so far so good. So missing middle housing, that might be all right. When it comes for that MPDU to be reviewed annually for rent increases, that would be the county, not the city, as law stands right now. And that process in the past has resulted in basically higher rent increases over time than at the city level.
Certainly. And
so far, so good, right? Did I get all this?
Yes, sorry. It looked like you had to say a little bit more.
Long
So
conversation.
I'm holding off here.
Yeah. So that's just something to know about MPDUs, thinking to the question of whether we want to increase the percentage of them or not. So just, again, county controlling the rent increases, not the city.
Correct. And I appreciate you bringing this up earlier this week because it's a really, really good question. You know, we've talked a lot throughout this process that the rental MPDU process is going to be interesting for us because, quite honestly, we haven't had any qualifying MPDU development since the law's been instituted, right? So, correct. MPDU units have a separate contract with the county that governs how their rent increases work. Traditionally, we have deemed those types of units exempt from our rent stabilization law. Now, the law is a little complicated and would probably, quite honestly, have to be addressed to account for these types of situations, which we
And I
haven't
would
had to
say
worry
we
about
might-
yet.
We might want to do that, but we're not
But
going to do
it's
that
certainly
tonight.
something that we would be bringing forward to you to make sure that that there is clarity on how those are applied.
And then I had one other technical point, again, to things that have been suggested potentially as additions to our comments, in terms of maintaining current zoning in the Maple Avenue area. If I look at the current zoning, R10, R20, R30, the height limits, particularly on R10, are quite high. And particularly along Maple Avenue and around that corner there, higher than what is proposed under the new zoning. And so I want to confirm that that is, that I'm reading this correctly. And so that just gives me some pause thinking about maintaining current zoning, especially if height is a concern on Maple Avenue.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I won't go digging
No,
through
we're
all
not
my
going through
documents
it
here,
yet.
but what I
No,
will
you're
say
right.
is, at a minimum in an R10 zone, correct, the maximum height for an R10 zone for multi-unit
Apartments.
buildings
Mhm.
is 100 feet.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more lights, we're going.
I'm sorry, I have one last question because I hope to not be thinking about this until the end of January when people get all mad about it again. So, the last question that I have about this process with regard to the procedural aspects of point A to point B for the future design of both areas. In theory, you have to have a streetscape or street design, full design for the Adventist property and in that area. But there is no such requirement along Maple Avenue as it currently is constituted. Is that related to the fact that there are so many different parcel holders? Or is it because there is no opportunity to require a coordinated development along Maple Avenue under this designation?
Sure, and I might want Roz to address that a little more fully than I can, so.
Good evening, Rosalind Grigsby, Community Development Manager. It's the latter point you raised, that there's not a single owner, it's not a single parcel. If you're looking at Maple Avenue, I think you're asking about the sketch plan. Like,
Yes,
why wouldn't
I
it come in as a whole in the sense that we're asking for the hospital campus to come through as a sketch plan, which is the big idea for the entire spot, even if it develops in phases or various segments. And Maple Avenue is just a different circumstance altogether. So it doesn't have a single owner, won't have a single plan. The likelihood of someone assembling, if someone assembled properties and came, then I think the county would push for a sketch plan first. And that's
Okay.
the opportunity to look at public benefits especially.
And then the very last thing that I would have to say about this is, let's say that on the Adventist site, the socially conscious church-related organization that owns that parcel decides that they are going to sell individual parts of that parcel to individual parties in order to develop as either single-family homes, condos, or even, because of the attendant headaches and potential disruptions at specific areas, they decide that they're going to go and seek a subdivision of that parcel. In that instance, what would happen then?
Because the language in the minor master plan specifically calls out that for parcel 23, the proposal come through as a sketch plan, we would still see that. It's very likely that the properties will be subdivided one way or another, Whether it's into single-family homes at 6,000 square feet, I don't know. But it would still be required to come conceptually as a whole. And the point is to avoid piecemeal things that then it would be harder to track the cumulative effect, and it would be, it would sidestep the public benefits requirement.
Thank you very, 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 very much.
Okay, thank you so much. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have us move the resolution. Then we can talk through any amendments to the conditions that are maybe on the table. Also, council members can share their thoughts or general comments on the minor master plan. So would someone like to move the resolution on the, gosh, what is this called? I'm sorry, y'all, it's a little late. Support for the planning board draft of the minor master plan amendment.
So moved.
Councilmember Hanzak moved. Councilmember Siemens seconded.
Yes?
Okay. Great. All right. Okay, so let's start with the conditions. So just as a reminder for folks, currently there are 5 conditions. The first condition was proposed by Councilmember Hanzak and includes the planning board include a recommendation within section 4.3.2.1 of the MMPA that the maximum heights of the new developments include consideration for both building heights and terrain slope with respect to neighboring existing single-family homes on Maplewood Avenue and Garland Avenue. The next condition is the planning board change the final recommendation in section 4.2.2.1 of the MMPA to read, while the plan recommends a diversity of residential and non-residential land uses in the Maple Avenue district, the overall development pattern shall remain primarily residential with commercial uses primarily devoted to ground floor retail or anchor employment opportunities. We spoke last week about the condition regarding schools. The planning board include a recommendation within section 3.1.2 of the MMPA that Montgomery County Public Schools address longstanding constraints, inadequacies, and inequities by prioritizing the rehabilitation and expansion of Piney Branch Elementary School or the construction of a replacement facility to bring it to conformity with the quality and standards of other schools in the county. And then the last 2 relate to protecting existing housing affordability in the MMPA. The planning board removed the following recommendation within section 3.3.2.1 of the MMPA. The city of Tacoma Park should consider a modification of its rent stabilization policy to increase flexibility, decrease complexity, and ensure the policy does not deter new investment while continuing to safeguard tenants from onerous rent increases. The second is the planning board include within the proposed housing resource list information on protections for individual condominium owners in the event of potential property sale and redevelopment. So are there any amendments or comments or questions regarding the conditions? Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. The only one that I have on here is that I would just prefer we put strike instead of remove in the final condition, where it says planning board remove the following recommendations. Like I'd feel better if it says strike, because like it's our rent control policy, it's not theirs. So
I think
it's more than cosmetic.
That's a friendly amendment.
Yeah.
Change and remove to strike.
Yeah.
Just triple checking with staff that this doesn't get out of whatever wording nomenclature that they like to use. Okay. That's considered a friendly amendment. Councilmember Gibson.
Yes, just had a couple of suggested word changes having to do with the second amendment or second condition. Oops. I would like to strike the words where it says the overall development pattern shall remain primarily residential with commercial uses devoted, to strike, how do I want to say this? It's striking primarily and shall be restricted to residential with commercial uses devoted to ground floor. I should say, replace primarily devoted to restricted is what I would like to say. It seems like primarily devoted is a little bit of is not as strong as I'd like to see.
So Councilmember Gibson, would you like to make that as a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to remove the two words primarily devoted and say and replace those with restricted.
Do we have a second? Okay. Hearing no second, we're going to move on to the next item. Is there any other amendments? Okay. All right, so it sounds like we don't have any additional amendments to the conditions that are here. So with that, I would like to open the floor to any comments or general comments that people would like to make regarding the minor master plan. Councilmember Honzak.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to thank the mayor and council members for cooperating with me on inserting some language into the resolution. It took a long time to get to that point. I'm going to take about 6 minutes. Thanks. I'd like to talk about the MMPA because I know how important this vote tonight is, particularly to my Ward 5 residents. Someone said tonight it's better to engage and shape the process, and that is the attitude that I have taken from the very beginning. We are a vibrant community with a history of high civic engagement, and I am very proud of that. It's why I chose to live here, and it's why I chose to run for this office. And we're also experiencing significant change. While passionate disagreements are common, I believe they contribute to essential dialogue for shaping our future. And it is evident to me that we have major trust deficits in this community, and they're not exclusive to our city of Takoma Park. But I really believe that we have to collaboratively create a better future while respecting each other's intentions. So I have actively listened to residents. I have examined our core values. I've consulted experts, addressed information gaps at every single step on our behalf. The City Council's first two resolutions on the MMPA reflect the questions and concerns of both the council and residents. And I know that everyone is not fully satisfied with the responses, but decisions now have to be made. I think it's time to move forward, considering the resolution's carefully crafted conditions. In listening to residents, and particularly those of Ward 5, and considering my vote tonight, I've pondered questions about representation, just development, and residents' vision. And here are some of the values I want to share with you that I have specifically taken into account that come straight from my particular community, and I think they are reflected in the revised draft and in the resolution. First, public benefit. So how do you define public benefit? I want to talk about three types. First, public open space. Public open space. I am very pleased that the plan now recognizes Hospital Hill. This is something that was asked a year ago of me by my residents. Second, I'm also very pleased that there's now an opening to Flower Avenue in recognition of the historic commons. This was requested by university professors who reached out to me and were concerned also about their feelings about the university. 3, in relation to public benefits. Desire for public amenities and facilities on the campus, like space for community gathering, a fitness center, or a swimming pool. And this gets back to what Councilmember Small was pressing on. In order to possibly get this kind of amenity, we absolutely must incentivize this by making it attractive for Washington Adventist University to do so. I believe this is achieved through CR zoning versus CRT zoning because it maximizes the number of minimum public benefit points. It is double the amount that you would get from CRT points. And it also maximizes the number of categories, meaning the different types of benefits that they would be required to exercise in the optional method development. And finally, the fourth type of public benefit is the public's desire for retail, which was extensively surveyed and documented by the city, particularly along Maple Avenue and among students. And that includes a grocery store. I think it's the right choice to do what we did in this amendment to include the primarily residential character of Maple Avenue, as was requested by residents. Value number 2, stormwater. I think our Tacoma Park stormwater protections, along with the zoning of the CR, again versus CRT or CRN, because it requires a sketch plan, are going to put us in a much better position than we have ever been historically and than we are in today. And I know stormwater is one of the #1 priorities of the surrounding neighborhoods. Value number 3, and this is not necessarily a focus of most Ward 5 residents, but I consider it to be extremely important. It is that I am pleased by the language that we've really pushed for on the schools that isn't one of these conditions. It's been an unsolved issue that I think deserves the city's utmost attention. I appreciate the mayor's testimony. I think it was critical, and I hope to see residents turn out in droves to advocate when this comes before county council for this issue so that we get to where we want to be at the end of the day on schools. Value number 4. Someone said, love our neighbors as ourselves. I couldn't agree with you more. Non-displacement of existing residents is absolutely essential. Every resident who lives here and wants to stay here should have the option to stay in the plan area. And I think we have to figure out how to achieve that. But I do believe that we have done what we needed to do in this plan to get there. And you may not agree with me. But I also think that it is just as important that we figure out how to create newer and more moderately priced dwellings so that people can move into those if they choose to do so and stay here for the rest of their lives if they want to and become homeowners. Value number 5. We believe in climate smart development and equity for today's and our future generations. The planning area of the hospital and university is exactly 1 mile, I remeasured it today, to public transit in 3 different directions. The Arliss Giant Station, the Tacoma Langley Transit Center, and also the DC Tacoma Metro Station. I can say because I live right adjacent to that area, it is just far enough that you want to drive a car to get places. So as the development progresses and as we watch the deficit right now in the transportation system, we as a community will absolutely need to ensure that public transit connectivity makes this area accessible, easy, and affordable, or we will have regrets. But I do think this is the right place at the right time, and that brings me to the final issue that is beyond the plan area. I have not made public that I have been communicating with the Planning Board about the fact that the Eastern Silver Spring Communities Plan is now launching. If you've looked on the website, you can see it. Will some of us Tacoma Park residents and our surrounding neighbors agree to increase density and height, as Councilmember Fulcher spoke about earlier this evening, at and around our transit centers without major resistance, so that we can get those vibrant transit hubs that have middle income and affordable housing in them, plus amenities? It means height, it means density, it means subdividing lots. This is what is critically needed to create smarter development. It's what everyone is saying that we need, so we really need to not resist this when it comes time. It's coming time. It's in part because of this resistance near every other transit center in our city than the ones in Ward 6 on University, that there is a desire to build on the Washington Adventist Hospital site in Ward 5. Will we be willing to welcome subdivision of lots for townhouses, for example? Please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the great amount of work that has gone into this minor master plan. I especially want to thank the city staff for the many hours of work they put into this, and the planning board itself for the attention they paid to this, and not only the attention they paid, but also for listening to the city throughout the process as this was developed to this point. I realize this is not the final master plan amendment, but I've been pleased with the way this has progressed. I also want to thank the community for talking with me and with the other council members. I've certainly heard many opinions on quite a few of the items within this minor master plan. And I would just say that there were concerns, I thought, that had been brought forward that we did have the opportunity to address and to make changes along the way. And I feel satisfied that what we have now with this resolution is good for the city and good for the residents. I know there's been a lot of fear mongering along the way, but I think we have addressed those concerns, and we can continue to address them. Some of them are concerns that cannot be controlled with the minor master plan, but can be controlled with the power of the legislative authority that this city council body has. So for those reasons, I'm in support of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Siemens. Councilmember DeBala.
Thank you. I've lived here more than 30 years. There hasn't been a lot of change. To be specific, there's been almost no change. I think that we need to move forward with this plan. I think it's time. And here's why. I truly believe it will help us achieve the city housing economic development goals, the vision that we have as outlined in our housing strategic plan. And to remind you all, they are to preserve current affordable housing, to produce more housing of all types, and to protect our renters. Ward 2 residents have shared with me a wide range of views. Oppose the plan, embrace the plan, accept the plan, but just change these three things. The most common things I've heard, concerns I've heard, have to do with protecting current low-income renters. Completely agree with that. But maintaining more affordable housing, ditto, and managing the impacts, especially traffic, of proposed development. And as I said earlier, like other debates in the city about development, passions run high. Some residents on either side believe theirs is the only view. I'm convinced that we all have similar goals. And we may differ how to get there, but I want to hang on to that we all have similar goals. To the resolution and specific issues, as I said, I support the resolution. The conditions that have been added address some of the major concerns for me. To the question of protecting current low-income renters in particular, I've done a deep dive over the last few weeks on a number of the things that residents have suggested. I alluded earlier to what I see as a major reason not to change the MPDU moderately priced dwelling units level at this point. I do think that as a city, we need to address that issue so that we can continue to manage the rents as we do for other residents in the city. I've looked at the language of other plans that have passed recently with respect to affordable housing and renter protection. And I think that the additions that have been made go about as far as a zoning plan can go. A zoning plan's only one tool. We have a bunch of tools in our at our disposal, and I think I look forward to a January work session to look at the details of what we can do outside of zoning, what we can do at the city level to, again, to achieve the goal that we all agree on, to protect the current low-income renters that we have. I have also shared concerns about environmental protections along the creek. I mentioned traffic earlier, and I've mentioned climate many times. And while I may not like it, you may not like it, county planning rules call for these things to be looked at a different stage, at a later stage. I am open to letting the county council know that we might want to change that. But at the moment, I don't see within this plan any additions that would help those sets of issues. And I do want and expect the city and residents to be actively engaged in these traffic and environmental and climate issues when and if we get to a site-specific site plan. That's a little redundant, but you know what I mean. There's a time coming up when we should be looking much more granularly at the details of the impacts. And I don't think that the planning process allows us to do that any more now than we have already done. And so I will be voting for this resolution. And I thank all the residents of Ward 2 who have come out to talk about this with me individually, sent me emails, called me up. And thank yous to the staff for working so diligently to track this process for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Councilmember Small. Councilmember Gibson, you will, actually, you will be after Councilmember Fulcher.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't plan to talk super long about this, but I'd like to return to a couple of things that I referenced in my previous comments, and that is the theme of accountability and how that is derived. And I would like to say that it's important as we take this vote and we take stock of the process by which we got here, that there are different ways of going about getting to a solution to a problem. There are cooperative ways, and then there are adversarial ways. You studied alternative dispute resolution as much as I did any other sort of legal framework. When you are organizing on an issue, you tend to pull out phrases that are provocative because it's easy to get people who aren't going to read anyway, because things are complex, to motivate themselves. When you are crafting policy, generally speaking, you have a long-term, like larger framework of complexities that are involved, and if it is your bailiwick, you could have been doing it for a long time, and that kind of expertise is always appreciated, but it's not inherently clear. And I'd like to return to the theme that there's no inherent clarity to expertise unless the expertise itself is designed to get to the solution to a problem. Unfortunately, that's what they ask lawyers and people who go work on the Hill or work issues to do, which is, you ought to be able to digest what the critical issues are, get a definitive answer on them, and move forward. In the time that I've been on this council, the most difficult thing to obtain from anyone involved in it whether it be a person on the staff or a member of the community, is a definitive answer about what it is about any given thing is the issue. And I was talking about cabooses before, because some of these things are institutionally caked into the way people approach their work around here. Some of these things are institutionally caked into the way people approach their public life around here. And some of these things are just a good way of trying to get to the solution to a problem. And I'd just like to think that moving forward from this point, we can back away from the more salacious and extreme examples of conduct about getting to the conclusion of an issue, so that we can approach clarity more completely and with more efficiency. Because it's not fun to listen to people say things about what it is that you've already fixed. And it's not fun to not have an opportunity to respond to accusations being thrown at you under the auspices of your requirements of decorum, when the nature of either the comments or the commentary is off-putting or alienating, either from the context of race or some other thing. And I just want people to be more considerate about how they think about the people who are up here, the people who they promote to espouse their views, and some of the really profound and provocative ways in which at least the county has chosen to point out profound gaps that are the responsibility of the municipality that we have yet to address. And my personal opinion about that, and the final thing I'd like to say about that, is that I suspect that maybe some of that is related to D's and M's internally. And I would really strenuously suggest that as we move forward, that we move forward with a planning department that has a director as well. I think that having the ability to speak at the level of your competency is important, and not trying to overspeak someone is also important. But we got a lot more done with regard to critical issues here that have been burning people on both ends in 10 minutes than we did this whole time. And that's not our fault. Thank you.
Councilmember Fulcher.
I just kind of want to reiterate what other people have been saying, which is we will continue to work with staff among our council to put in protections of affordable housing and to lift the possibilities of middle income housing within our own city code. And for me, and I think for most of us, that we looked at the changes in zoning as a possibility to create more housing and to create more diversity in housing. And I think we've gotten there. I don't want to go too negative here and speak too much against things that have been thrown away, like accusations. But you know, I can speak for myself, which is this has not been an effort to gain taxes from any of those areas. That is not my consideration. My consideration is we need more housing in the DC area and everywhere that we're seeing these days, and that it is our job ethically to try to figure out how we can do that And I can't speak to what the rest of Montgomery County is going to do in order to address a housing shortage. What I can do is work with my colleagues to figure out what we can do here in Tacoma Park in order to support that, in order to help stop the shortage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Councilmember Gibson?
Yes, I'll be brief because I believe I sort of said my piece at the beginning with comments. But I want to first, I want to thank several, not by name, but several residents, many of them are in my Ward 3, that have helped me learn about this process. I obviously did not come into the job with a zoning background, but I've learned about zoning. I didn't come back into the job with an environmental degree, but I've learned about the environmental impacts. And I had other constituents have just really organized information and dug in that I have learned, and I've done my best to try and present a position and what I think is the right thing to do. I will vote against this resolution. It doesn't use the main tool that we have, which is zoning. And we have some really well-intentioned recommendations and conditions, but we're not even touching the main tool with the zoning. I'll just leave it at that, except to say, like all of my colleagues, we will move forward with whatever the outcome is here, as well as at the county council level, and we'll try and do our best to pull together the collaboration, the resources, and as much community as we can to do those preserve, produce, and protect our environment and our housing and our residents. So thanks again to Ward 3 and other residents of the city that have taught me a lot.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. Councilmember DeBala?
Yeah, I didn't hear anyone mention something pretty important to think about, although I believe it's on all of our minds, which is, what is it like if we don't do this? If we don't take the step to rezone the hospital area, to take the look at Maple Avenue and what we need to do to provide not just affordable but quality housing there. And so I just wanted to leave everybody with that thought. Thank you for letting me have another turn.
Sure. Well, thank you all to my colleagues for all of the time, energy, and effort that went into this resolution and the entire minor master plan amendment process. I was there from the start, so I can't imagine how it is to be coming in at this stage of the game and having to get up to speed, not only on the rationale regarding prior decisions that were made, but to be in the thick of the actual rollout of a proposed plan. And so I want to thank my colleagues because you all handled all of the punches with grace because they were coming fast and furious. And I also want to thank our city staff for all of your responsiveness and all of the fact sheets and all of the materials and all of the meetings that we had on the minor master plan, really to work to educate members of the community around zoning generally. I'm not going to take long because it's almost 10:30, but I do want to speak from the perspective of, I guess, kind of picking up where Councilmember DeBala left off. What is the cost if we do nothing, right? We haven't had any new development in the city for, since the 80s. And Councilmember Honzak and I had an opportunity to talk to residents in the Essex House about the minor master plan and what it meant, what their concerns were. And one of the things that came up was, I love it here in this community. I love it here. I don't want to lose my home. I've raised my family here. I've lived here for a very long time. Another thing that came up was, can you do something to fix these things that are going on in this building, right? And then when the idea was brought up about possible home ownership, when the idea was brought up, even for the possibility of being able to rent more space, like a townhome or something, so their families can spread out more, people were so like, yes, we want that, right? And when you talk to staff here and they have to live in Baltimore, or they have to live out in, I'm pointing to you, Ira, but they live in Baltimore, or they live out in Howard County, because there's nowhere here for them to live. We have young officers, and there's nowhere for them to live. We have teachers that you want to have invested in the community, but they can't afford to live here. They make too much money to be in some of our deed-restricted buildings, but not enough money to be in some of the more luxury high-rises, whatever, in Silver Spring. So what is the cost if we do nothing? We can continue to have this segregation in our community where we may be purposefully, unknowingly, well-meaningly locking people into certain living situations because they love our community and we haven't provided them with the path out. And so I think it's critically important for us to make sure that we're not having displacement happen in our community. And I think the push that we did in that regard was fruitful. I think that the MMPA really did do quite a bit to try to drill that home. A number of the other factors that we included, maintaining public space and really making sure that we're doing our due diligence around Sligo Creek, and really trying to make sure that aspects of the abutting of properties and things were thought through. There's still some things that are left to be done, which is why we're doing this today. But I think that what we have to start focusing on now is not just the zoning, but what are the things that we want to do as a community in order to have the policies necessary to incentivize the type of development we want to seek, right? We heard earlier, some of the buildings on Maple Avenue are zoned to go to the moon right now. They're not. And it's because you have to have the right types of incentives. You have to have the right types of policies in place that will actually bring people to the table to make the necessary development that you want to see in the community. So my hope is that this is the first step, but it will not be the last. We'll even talk about some stuff in the next resolution we have to talk about in terms of budget priorities, because I'm big on trying to figure out this pilot situation. But this is just a first step. So I appreciate everyone that's come out multiple nights and expressed your thoughts and concerns. I want you to keep doing that, keep doing it. Do it to the county. I'm with you, fighting alongside you. But I do want to let the community know that I will be voting in favor of the plan, because I do think that it's the legwork has been done. More could be done, but we've headed in the right direction enough to be able to move forward in the process. So with that, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll for the amended resolution in support of the planning board draft of the minor master plan amendment.
Mayor Searcy?
Aye.
Councilmember Fulcher?
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala?
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson?
Nay.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Honsack?
Aye.
Councilmember Small?
Yes.
All right, thank you all so
Or,
much.
yes, I didn't, that more forceful than that. I didn't mean for it to be like that.
Like you were contemplating. All right. Well, thank you so much. We're going to move on. We're really close to recess,
Madam
y'all.
Mayor,
Yes.
if I may just very briefly, Ross and I were just discussing when we transmit this resolution to the planning board before their hearing tomorrow. I'm anticipating there might be a few clarifying questions, especially about this first bullet. So we might be following up just to make sure that we're representing that bullet accurately. So I will
Excellent.
report back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. So we're going to move on to the next resolution adopting the council budget priorities. Now, I know that this was sent around, some of the modifications were sent around a little later this afternoon, so I'm just going to read through the resolution to just make sure that everyone knows what is in it. Whereas the Tacoma Park City Council is charged with setting policy, approving the budget, and pursuing legislative changes in the best interest of the Tacoma Park community. And whereas the council priorities adopted by Resolution 2023-13 inform the development of the city manager's recommended budget and more generally indicate the strategic direction the council intends to move the city during this term. And whereas the conclusion of the FY 2024 budget schedule, the City Council passed Resolution 2023-15, establishing certain policy objectives associated with the subsequent fiscal year's budget. And whereas in Resolution 2023-34, the City Council adopted its FY 2025 budget calendar, which required the council to establish FY 2025 budget priorities designed to identify priority projects for implementation and aid city staff during the budget development process. And whereas the City Council's FY 2025 budget priorities are: take next steps to advance development of the Tacoma Park Rec Center, identify a specific public space management plan activity based on new evaluation tool. Potential projects may include Ann Street, Haverford, or an activity related to natural resources. Implement the Community Navigator Program. Improve traffic calming in the city by changing traffic calming policies and or conducting traffic studies in priority areas, i.e. Ritchie Ave, New Hampshire Gardens community, and near Purple Line stations. And advance the city's housing efforts by updating housing policies, i.e. payment in lieu of taxes, a pilot, and community development block grant funds, CDBG, incentivizing multifamily rehabilitation, i.e. energy efficiency, electrification, and building improvements, and addressing matters regarding code enforcement and multifamily on-site property management, and explore implementing a stormwater project based on results from the stormwater resiliency study. And whereas the city staff will provide the city council with cost estimates and assessments of the feasibility of implementing the aforementioned priorities during FY 2025 budget work sessions. And whereas the council may revisit the budget priorities as it deems necessary to make changes or adjustments. And whereas the council acknowledges there are a number of major projects, initiatives, and ongoing activities which will take city funds to complete in addition to the FY 2025 budget priorities. And whereas with this in mind and the City Council's commitment to advancing its goal of having a fiscally sustainable government, the City Council requests staff examine how the FY 2025 budget priorities might impact the overall budget. And whereas the City Council requests that staff submit a budget impact estimate to assess the impact of the FY 2025 budget priorities based on the following assumptions. 1, the tax rate is equal to the current tax rate. 2, city expenditures increase by 4% due to inflation. And 3, unassigned reserve contributions ensure GFOA recommended 17% unassigned reserve balance. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the City of Tacoma Park formally adopts the FY 2025 budget priorities, and city staff will incorporate these projects as part of their FY 2025 budget formulation efforts. Be it further resolved that the city staff will also submit a budget impact estimate based on the scenario assumptions proposed by council as part of the FY 2025 budget work sessions. Okay, so would someone like to move the resolution adopting the council budget priorities?
So moved, Mayor, but I do have a friendly when we get to it.
Yeah. Councilmember Small moved. Do we have a second?
I second.
Councilmember Gibson second. Councilmember Small has a friendly amendment.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that when we discussed it the other day, we did specifically call out Erskine Street.
Oh,
Because, and I did want to note them because technically that's the
busiest.
and
Yep.
they're on the other side of New Hampshire, and so it's one of those things that is my personal, like, just make sure both sides of the street get their appropriate amount of attention.
So
Thank
is
you.
Erskine and what, or just Erskine?
It's just Erskine, you know, that's
Because it's
the,
on,
Yeah, I know
on
what
one
it is.
side
I
is
just-
Glenside, and so that's like the New Hampshire Ave neighbor, or New Hampshire Gardens neighborhood, but on the other side, it's Hillwood Manor, but the choke point is the top
Is
street,
Erskine.
so.
okay. So the amendment is, improve traffic calming in the city by changing traffic calming policies and/or conducting traffic studies in priority areas, i.e. Ritchie Ave, New Hampshire Gardens Community, Erskine Street. And this should say, I'm gonna add my own, and areas near Purple Line stations.
Yeah, I thought you said that part.
I don't think I did.
Can I ask
Somehow
for
the end
clarity
areas
on,
got dropped.
just because the language was a little, modified over the time since we initially discussed this. Would people assume that all the way down Flower is still near the Purple Line station? Do you infer that? I mean,
I would.
because we have a lot of needs throughout that narrow corridor that comprises Ward 5, and that is one of the reasons this made it into my top few priorities. But I don't know whether that's inferred by that Purple Line, if it's adequate. I don't necessarily want to name particular streets just because it's too wordy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I took, near areas near Purple Line stations, as I recall them, to be defined as like all of that area that typically
Okay, that's
is.
okay. I just want to make sure because we've got a number of needs. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so council member, I'm sorry, I've lost track of who had hands up first. Councilmember Fulcher?
And I mean, it seems like there's wiggle room about which areas are going to be addressed, because it says by changing traffic calming policies, right? And so that could address everywhere. So thank you for that. And I can appreciate that this says a lot about necessary to make changes and adjustments to the priorities. Do we have any idea of when we might hear back about some of these estimates?
We're shooting for when you return from recess.
Okay.
Some of it depends on additional communication with council on some clarity on items, but January is when we're shooting for.
Yeah, and I appreciate that this is still a big list. Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Gibson?
Yes, I wonder whether there is greater clarity on the very last bullet regarding stormwater projects, because I believe that stormwater project, explore implementing a stormwater project, I think it would be, the intent is that on private property, that's the, which was the focus of the LICD resiliency study. So I just would wonder if that would be appropriate to say a stormwater project on private properties, not a private property.
I think if I
Councilmember
may,
DeBala?
if I may, an earlier draft said explore implementing a public-private stormwater project. So maybe that's what we should put back.
Yeah, that would be equally good to help clarify.
Yeah, just like it used to say, end areas near the
I
property line
don't
before
want
that
to
got
like
lost.
pile on to staff time, but I mean, I do think that we're still at a point where we're deciding whether it would be a private property or
Right.
not.
Well, we don't have the
And so-
recommendations yet, so it's kinda
because
hard
we
to-
haven't seen the recommendations. So just making sure that it leaves room for it to not be on private property in the wording.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear on this point. So it sounds like the amendment right now is explore implementing a public-private stormwater project based on results from the stormwater resiliency study.
But what I hear Councilmember Fulcher saying is public or private,
Okay.
which.
And I would prefer that, well, I'm sorry.
So Councilmember Gibson, you would prefer the or?
You would prefer just
No,
the word.
the public-private, what Cindy suggested, so that it's a combination.
I don't
I
consider
think-
that to be a friendly
No,
amendment. That's a
I'm
huge
just-
change.
we
And
need
so
to
I feel
vote.
like we would need to vote on it.
Yep. Okay, so we're gonna vote on the language. So
I'm fine with doing either the language that the language that it is, to me, leaves it open to be a public or a private. And so I think, to me, that the vote is whether we're changing it to say private or not.
And if I may, since we don't have the results of the study, we don't really know
We
what
don't
they're
know.
going to recommend.
Right. I will say I would prefer to leave it open and have it based on the study itself and have staff come back as part of the feasibility projects to provide us with details about what makes the most sense in terms of the types of projects. So it sounds like Councilmember Gibson feels strongly about making a motion.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make the motion if anybody wants to second it, that we go back to that, what Cindy referred to as earlier language that said public-private.
I'm sorry, and I just want to say that when I put this in my priority list, I specifically said, as per LIDC's recommendations. I did not say a private partnership, and so this feels more in line with what my recommendation, my priority was. And so, yeah, just in fairness as to, like, and I understand that Councilmember Gibson is saying that he wrote the priority differently for him, but this is in line with how I wrote it for myself. And so it's not historic as far as what my intent was when I was writing my priority.
Councilmember Gibson?
Yeah, I'm okay if we just leave it as is right now, which leaves it wide open. My clear understanding of what and participated, at least observed what LIDC did was to go to focus on private property. But I'll take back my motion just so we don't have to have a vote on it, then leave it where it's at.
And I'm sorry, I just want to say, Councilmember Gibson, if that is clearly what LIDC comes back to us with, that is what I will support.
Yes, fine.
Great. And one point, because we are having discussions, that has been a point that I believe I included in the email, is staff needing clarity regarding addressing matters regarding code enforcement and multifamily on-site property management.
Wait, I'm sorry, where are
This
you?
is in the fifth priority.
Oh, thank you.
And I know that there were lots of discussions around code enforcement. And I know Councilmember Honzak, you mentioned multifamily on-site property management. So would you like to speak to particularly that aspect of what it was that you are looking for
I
staff support?
am not sure if I want to put it in this resolution, but I welcome a conversation with staff as needed.
It'd be helpful to
I
have.
have outlined a number of things that are going on with some of my properties that are challenging, and whether I would welcome greater staff support for sort of resolving some of those issues. We haven't really had time to dig into them with your staff support, so I'm not yet clear on what role the staff will need to play in that. I think you've been copied on some of those emails, but I'd be
If
happy
it's-
to elaborate.
If we think we can get consensus
Yep.
without the clarity in the document, then okay. My concern is that there may be other opinions about what this means, and we won't have
I
time
see.
and opportunity
Okay.
to get consensus other than this conversation.
Okay. It is possible that we have right now the staffing that is needed to address some of my property management concerns. The concerns range from getting my residents to have greater levels of service. I mean, that I don't think that the answer is necessarily small grants, just as a for example. I think it may be in the form of staffing and just making sure that those staffers are maintained. I haven't really seen the staffers leveraged, but that is almost certainly because I'm not aware yet of what they're doing as they do their rounds. It is getting more staffing on site to sort of connect with residents in some of my multifamily units to find out what's going on site, ranging from, just as a for example, I don't want to name my buildings right here on the dais right now. Some of my buildings who are having some serious issues right now with the residents haven't been getting services from their resident service buildings that are supposed to be delivering those services for the last year. I also have, I would like someone to go out and do a fuller assessment of what's going on with emergency management issues. We just faced something this past weekend that was really deeply disturbing to me at one of my buildings. And again, I think it's partially a staffing issue and figuring out how the city's housing department can go out and provide a fuller array of on-site visits, connecting with the people who are supposed to be delivering services to the residents, following up with code enforcement and being proactive as necessary. And that's about all I can say at this point. Does that get a little closer to
It's
where we need to be?
helpful
Yeah.
For me to understand your
Okay.
perspective.
I don't know if that
is-
aligns with
Yeah.
those of others, and how many other people have the similar concerns. I have that in more than just one of my buildings, at least 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah, so that's helpful. Again, my goal was this to get consensus. So if there's no difference in opinion and there's no desire to add any more specificity, then we'll roll with that.
I'm looking at you because you also have large multifamily buildings.
No, I was going to say, with regard to that, I do think that there are some immediate accountability issues with regard to the code and its implementation and enforcement. They could probably be best served by code enforcement being involved in them as opposed to otherwise. And I think maybe that's really where the rubber hits the road here.
Where the two of you were, yeah.
Whether that be the outside aesthetics and or safety of the buildings with regard to lighting and things like that, or internal issues about habitability and expectations of accountability. I think that's normal or reasonable.
And that reminds me that those two concepts were the things that the two of you had noted were things that you really wanted to make sure that there was something related to housing regarding. Yeah. Okay. So Acting City Manager Eubanks, is that enough clarity?
Informally, yes. It doesn't seem like I'm gonna get the formal clarity in the document, but this is fine.
Okay.
And then if we're on the topic of clarity, it'd be helpful if we could further define activity in bullet point number 2.
Before we leave the code enforcement, before we leave the housing bullet, when I read this, I thought code enforcement and multifamily property management were two separate thoughts. It sounds like they are related. There are other code enforcement issues. So if we specifically mean multifamily property management, let's just take out code enforcement, because we've clarified that it includes how the code is enforced.
Mm-hmm.
But to not confuse other people who might be thinking about other code enforcement issues
Mhm.
in other places in the city. Yeah, that
Did
would be-
anybody else include code enforcement
yes,
that was a reason for this being in there? Oh, I see.
I did.
Can you speak to that then, Councilmember Gibson?
Yeah, okay. I believe that I did put code enforcement, and it had to do with the implementation of code enforcement and some policy changes that I would recommend, and I've spoken somewhat with Mr. Cowler and with Mr. Eubanks about that. But there is a different. It's more traditional code enforcement questions, not what was discussed tonight here by Kara and
And if I may, it says later on that there's just, we have routine work, we have programs that we do code enforcement. And we all know there are things about code enforcement that probably want to change. What are the budget priorities for this year that are going above and beyond what is a regular business, or questions about regular business, or policy changes in regular business? And so that would suggest to me that perhaps that what Councilmember Gibson is talking about, and what I have in my ward also, in terms of other code enforcement issues, really don't belong in this budget resolution.
I would agree with that.
I have one more thought on code, if we're doing code, but it's not related to this issue. It's
So let's
budget
related. Let's stick to budget related.
And the other potential issue or potential emergent opportunity, I would think, could potentially be whether or not we are obtaining and ensuring the licensure of all appropriate businesses, whether they be in the Crossroads corridor or other places, with regard to our licensing and making sure that those things are displayed and all those other kinds of things, as far as whether or not we are generating all of the appropriate funds that are associated with doing business in the town appropriately, as a function of work.
So I would say that that's conceptually something
It's fine with me.
new. Yeah, I
don't have to be
do.
there.
Yeah, I do. But that's something that definitely, being mindful. Again, the goal of this document is to help staff with being able to understand what are some of the priority, tangible things, activities that we want to do over the next year that may cost money. And so if the idea is we really want to make sure that we have additional staffing support that can get out into our multifamily buildings more often to help the residents, or to do the necessary follow-up on maintenance issues and the like, working with the county, then that might mean that we are going to push for another person in HCD that could help with that. So that would be something that would be important for us to be able to understand. So it sounds like, and I've been making some.
And I would add, Mayor, just that there's a revenue generation component potentially to making sure that we keep all our licenses and displays or whatever displayed and licensed.
So it sounds like.
Can I just want to venture a guess that some of my issues with code enforcement might be similar to some of the ones that Councilmember Gibson is talking about. For instance, right now, like the length of time in order to make a repair post, I don't want to say post-pandemic, I do understand that COVID's still an issue, but post being now that we're in a COVID world, it seems like there's still a lot of backlogs for being able to get a contractor to come and do something. But that was not my priority. And so I appreciate what Councilmember Dybala is saying about maybe code enforcement isn't a succinct enough piece of language, especially from what Acting City Manager Eubanks is saying, because it's true that could have been some of the things that I'm seeing, or some of the things that Councilmember Gibson is seeing, and that was not on my list, and it would be helpful, even for me, for looking at this document, to understand no, that's not the priority when we're talking in this space.
No, that's helpful. Councilmember Gibson, is it still on this matter of code enforcement?
Yeah. So I guess when we were talking originally about priorities, we're talking about staff time and changes to the code enforcement policies would take staff time, but I do not think that they have the same, it's not in the same league as, say, as several of the other bullets, priorities here in terms of how much money. So if I can live with it being taken off this list of high budget priorities, but let it be known, I guess, that looking at code enforcement policy is a priority.
Great, thank you so much, Councilmember Gibson. So it sounds like there's agreement to remove code enforcement from bullet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then to slightly modify the language to say, and forgive me because I'm kind of writing this on the fly, and multifamily building support, i.e. potential staff, additional staff for.
No, I think multifamily on-site property management is fine. Why would you want to change that?
Do we? I'm trying to figure out if people are saying, "Hey, I would be open to another body," if we're if we're being told.
Or management and monitoring
Management
of
and monitoring.
multifamily on-site property, so that it's clear that that's what we're talking about if someone thinks about code enforcement. I don't know. I'm looking at the city, our acting city manager, if that is any greater clarity than what we've got there already.
I don't have a great idea of what language to include. I think
Yeah.
I have a good idea of what you mean.
Okay.
So as long as there's an informal understanding
Yeah.
of that,
I
then
think that informal understanding has been made abundantly.
cool. Then I
Yes.
think.
So
we're
we will keep the language multifamily on-site property management.
Okay.
And you can roll the beautiful bean footage if you ever want to hold us to what we're saying.
Cool.
All right, so just want to make sure there are no more amendments, and then we will be ready to go ahead and move this vote.
Mayor,
two things.
I want to be a stickler for this only because we don't have a whole lot of bites at the apple. And so, similar to bullet point number 5, if we could provide that informal clarity for bullet point number 2, where we talk about activity, just so I'm clear of how to give staff direction.
Right, so identify a specific public space management plan activity. So our understanding was that staff would be looking into possible projects, and some potentially were already identified over the course of the public space management plan process. And so the idea would be that staff would come back to us with a couple of ideas of projects that they would like for us to consider that meet the thresholds of the evaluation tool. And so we want to make sure, at least I'm speaking for us all, want to make sure that we have room in the budget to put a project in for potential implementation. And some of the projects that were included were Ann Street or Haverford, or if there's something that comes up that relates to natural resources, we wanted to make sure that there was room in the budget to actually implement something that is a result of the public space management plan. So that was the idea for that one. We don't know which activity yet because we don't know what staff have done in terms of using the tool.
Yeah.
But we did want to make sure that it was clear that we wanted an activity to, or something from the plan, a project from, and maybe it's changing it from activity to project.
It's not so much the activity, that sentence is clear enough that we want to include a project in the budget. I think where I get, have concern is when we mention Ann Street and Haverford. I don't think staff are familiar with exactly what we mean by those two projects.
Oh, I've been selling Ann Street for a long time.
Yeah,
If you were to
they're
ask
placemaking
Roz what
opportunities.
Ann Street
They're
means, she's
definitely
gonna tell you,
placemaking.
she's gonna
Placemaking.
know.
Street and
placemaking opportunities.
Okay.
Yep.
There you go.
So is there any additional?
I have two things that I'd like to touch on, and one is about priorities, and it goes to the distinction between a budget priority and a policy priority. So, as you all know, I think climate action should be a policy priority for us. I trust that current city programs will continue. I remind everyone that COP28, 200 nations just agreed to transition away from fossil fuels, and that the city of Tacoma Park needs to do our little bitty part, because no one else can do city operations, no one else can do smaller multifamily buildings, et cetera. But when it comes to this budget priority list, I am content with incentivizing multifamily rehabilitation, including efficiency and electrification. And I'm not proposing to add anything. I'm pointing out the distinction there. The second question that I have has to do with the part of the last whereas. So if we're up to that, can I inquire on number 1? The tax rate is equal to the current tax rate. I thought that we were discussing the current tax rate plus some increment that would capture inflation. And then there was a number of ways of defining that. We used to call it constant yield plus ECI, and for a whole bunch of reasons that doesn't work.
So one of the reasons why the scenario is simply the current tax rate is because a lot of those numbers that would be pertinent to trying to come up with an estimate won't be available during now, when staff would need to be developing aspects of the budget. So one of the cleaner ways is to say, okay, let's just assume we're gonna keep the tax rate the same, making it up. And then let's just assume that we know our cost of doing business may increase up to 4%. So we're just gonna say, hey, you're gonna have to assume that the costs are going to increase, and we need to make sure that we're gonna have our reserves. And so from there, then the question becomes, okay, how can you accommodate any aspects of what it is that we may be proposing? It could be, hey, the only way we're gonna be able to do this stuff, we're only gonna be able to budget 3 items, otherwise you're gonna have to raise the tax rate. Or, hey, we can budget them all, but we may have to get rid of an entire department. I don't know.
Okay.
But that's a little cleaner than starting to try to identify other ways of assuming increases in revenues now, which would mean by adding that other factor like ECI, or I've seen other people propose other things, you're basically saying, hey, we're going to add on to the revenues, but that money has to come from somewhere. So it's kind of like you're assuming an increase in the tax rate when folks may not want to be there. So you may want to just assume that we're just gonna, the floor is where we are now. The floor is where we are now. And then what we will do is try to deal with how we're gonna manage the fact that, for example, we're in a multi-year contract now with the union. We know what some of those increases in salary rates may be. So then you can kind of make some assumptions about the 4%, and then that then gives staff some inclination in terms of how much wiggle room do you have for new stuff if you know council wants these things and they're pricing out these things. So it just to give them a little bit of a parameter around what may be feasible versus including a bunch of other additional factors.
Thank you for walking me through that, because when I first read it tonight, if you're keeping one big piece of your revenues flat and you know your expenditures are increasing, then right away you've got a gap. So what was the use of that? Okay, so you've explained that. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Gibson?
Yeah, I just want to say that I would accept this this proposal on our tax rate goal. I feel obligated to say we haven't had a robust discussion. Our working sessions did not touch on various options for tax rate goals. I have floated a different one, and it has to do with working around the property tax revenue estimates plus 4%. But
Yeah, because we know the revenues.
so anyhow, I think it's probably going, as you say, cleaner. But I guess I regret that we did not have the robust discussion that we needed on multiple options of looking at a scenario which does what this one does, but there are others as well. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. Okay, so we have on the floor now the amended council budget priorities. I just want to make sure that everybody understands what the amendments were. So again, to bullet 1, 2, 3, 4, we've added Erskine and just clarifying and areas near new Purple Line stations. And then for bullet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we have just taking code enforcement out.
Yep.
Okay, so
Do we need to move anything?
I think we've already moved it.
Oh, all right. All right. I was going to double do it.
We've already moved it. Just checking with Irma. Did we move this, right? Yeah. Yep, we've already moved it. So now we just vote. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy?
Aye.
Councilmember Fulcher?
Yes.
Councilmember DeBala?
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens? Councilmember Honsack?
Yes.
Councilmember Small?
Yes.
All right, excellent. Thank you all so much for bearing with us with that. And the last item on our list, setting forth the dates for City Council winter holiday recess. Councilmember DeBala moves.
Seconded.
Third. Sorry, just kidding. We have.
Can we have a third?
We have started earlier, the break. Like, I know that this says December 13th, but could it have been like after Thanksgiving, maybe? We could have been on.
I don't think you could do it retroactively. It doesn't work that way.
So
Space-time
Councilmember
continuum.
DeBala moved. Councilmember, who seconded? Councilmember
Jason.
Small seconded.
Yes.
All right. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy?
Aye.
Councilmember Fulcher? Yes. Councilmember DeBala?
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens? Councilmember Honsack?
Yes.
Councilmember Small?
Yes, yes, y'all.
All right. So that means that we are officially on recess.
To adjourn.
Yes. All right, awesome. Councilmember Small has made a motion to adjourn. Do we have any seconds? Second. Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. All right, thank you all so much. I hope everyone has a fantastic recess. Have a good night.